Middle and upper-class Victorian Londoners would never think to visit the East End, for at the very least it was mysterious, and for most it was dark, dirty and dangerous, where a human life wasn't worth a penny. The wealthy deliberately avoided these streets where 2 million souls scratched out a desperate existence amid disease, starvation and violence. Here's what it was really like to survive in Victorian London's brutal East End. So, yeah, if these stories work for you, subscribe. And I'm curious, what time is it where you are? Comment below. Last week, someone from Canada said they listened during lunch breaks. Not judging, just wasn't expecting that. We're heading to Victorian London's East End in a minute. First though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second, adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. Your eyes snap open to darkness. Something's crawling across your face. You swat it away without thinking, probably just a cockroach. Your body aches from sleeping in the same position all night, but you can't move. There are 5 other people sharing this bed with you, and if you wake them, they'll be furious. The straw mattress beneath you crackles as you try to shift your weight. A cloud of dust rises, tickling your nose. You hold back a sneeze. Welcome to your life in London's East End, 1860. The air is thick with the stench of unwashed bodies, human waste, and the sickly sweet smell of decay. Outside, factory smoke hangs in a perpetual cloud, turning even the morning light a murky grey. You can taste it, gritty, ashy, coating your tongue, not like the clean air you're breathing right now in your cosy bed. Time to get up, hisses your mother. She's already awake, has been for an hour, stoking the tiny coal fire that's the only source of heat in this 10 by 12 room you share with your entire family. Factory bells about to ring. God, the factory bell. That sound haunts your nightmares. 5 in the morning until 9 at night, 6 days a week. But it's either that or starve, and you've seen what starvation does to people around here. The hollow cheeks, the distended bellies of children, the vacant stares. No, the factory's hell, but at least it pays. Sort of. East London in the Victorian era wasn't just poor, it was another world entirely. The wealthy Londoners in the West End called it Darkest London, like it was some unexplored continent, not just a few miles from their mansions. They literally wouldn't go there, wouldn't even acknowledge it existed most of the time. Can you believe, your father once told you, there are people in this very city who've never set foot east of Aldgate, who've never smelled the tanners or heard the screams from the slaughterhouses, who sleep one to a bed. The very idea sounds like a fairy tale. Speaking of beds, yours isn't even yours for the full day. See, in the worst parts of the East End, they had what they called the 3 relay system. 1 bed, 3 different tenants, each getting it for 8 hours. When your shift was done, you'd be kicked out, so the next person could get some sleep. Bed was never cold, never clean either. You're lucky, relatively speaking. Your family can afford a single room. Many can't and end up in the doss houses, common lodging houses where you pay 4p a night for a space in a shared room. If you couldn't afford that, there were places that would let you sleep draped over a rope for 2p. Yeah, a rope strung across a room that you'd lean over, arms dangling, catching what rest you could before the rope master cut it at dawn, sending everyone tumbling to the floor. I saw old Jenkins sleeping in the gutter again, your sister whispers as she pulls on her threadbare dress. Reckon he couldn't make the 4p for the doss. Better the gutter than the workhouse, your father mutters darkly. The workhouse, just the word sends shivers through the room. Everyone knows that's the last stop before the grave. Families separated, back-breaking labour, food that barely qualifies as such, a prison for the crime of being poor. You drag yourself from the bed, careful not to wake your younger siblings. They'll be up soon enough for their shifts at the match factory. Little fingers are good for delicate work, the foreman says. Doesn't mention how the phosphorus eats away at their jawbones, causing bossy jaw. A gruesome, painful condition that disfigures and eventually kills. Wait, hold up. Let me explain what I mean by room. I'm using that term loosely here. What you're actually living in is a space that might have once been part of a nice townhouse back when this area was respectable, but that was generations ago. Now that house has been subdivided again and again. What was once a single-family home might now hold 40 people or more. Your room has crumbling plaster walls, a ceiling that leaks when it rains, and floorboards so rotten in places you can see straight down to the room below. There's one window, cloudy with grime, that looks out onto an airless courtyard, and the walls are so thin you can hear everything your neighbours do. Every cough, every argument, every intimate moment. Privacy doesn't exist here. "Hurry up with that water, will you?" your mother says, gesturing to the communal pump in the courtyard. "We need tea before work." Ah yes, the water situation. For about 400 houses in your neighbourhood, there might be one water pump, and it only works for about 10-12 minutes a day. Picture that, hundreds of people fighting for water from a single pump that's only on for a few minutes. And the water itself, drawn from the Thames, which is basically an open sewer. Brown, foul, and deadly, but it's all you've got. You grab the bucket and head down the narrow stairs, past doors behind which whole families are waking to the same grim reality. The stairway is dark, no windows, no lamps. You navigate by memory and by the faint grey light filtering in from the courtyard door. Outside, the cold hits you like a slap. It's February, and the damp London chill cuts through your thin clothes. The courtyard is already busy, a line forming at the pump, women with buckets, children with jugs, everyone with that same hollow-eyed look. The daily scramble for survival has begun. "Heard there's cholera on Dorset Street," a woman tells another as they wait. 3 dead already. Cholera, typhoid, tuberculosis, smallpox. These aren't just words here. They're constant companions. In the crowded conditions of the East End, disease spreads like wildfire. The 1866 cholera outbreak killed over 3,000 people in East London alone. You take your place in line, shivering. The smell is overwhelming. The cesspit behind the houses hasn't been emptied in months. There's no proper sewage system here, just holes in the ground that fill with waste until they overflow. The landlords don't care. Why spend money on improvements when desperate people will pay for any shelter, no matter how squalid? "Move along," shouts the pump keeper. "Water's only on another 6 minutes." The line shuffles forward, everyone tense. Arguments break out regularly here, sometimes escalating to violence. Water is life, after all. Oh, and the pump keeper. He's not providing a public service. He works for the water company, making sure no one gets more than their share. The water isn't free. Your rent includes a water charge, whether the water flows or not. And if you're late on rent, good luck getting any water at all. When it's finally your turn, you thrust your bucket under the rusty spout. The water that comes out is cloudy and smells faintly of the river, but it's wet, and that's what matters. You fill your bucket as much as you dare, too heavy, and you'll spill it on the treacherous stairs. Too light, and there won't be enough for tea and washing. Back in your room, your mother has the kettle ready on the small fire. Tea is precious, the leaves used and reused until there's no flavour left, but hot liquid in your belly helps ward off the constant cold and hunger. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a crust of bread, maybe with dripping if it's been a good week at the factory. You dress quickly in the same clothes you wore yesterday and the day before that. Washing clothes is a luxury that happens perhaps once a month. Your boots, your only pair, have holes in the soles that you've stuffed with newspaper. They'll be soaked through within minutes in the damp streets, but it's better than going barefoot on the filthy cobblestones. Ready? Your father asks, already pulling on his worn coat. He works at the docks when there's work to be had, day labour, fighting among hundreds of others for the chance to break his backloading cargo for pennies. Some days he comes home with money, many days he doesn't. Those are the hungry days. Here's something you might not know about Victorian London. The divide between rich and poor wasn't just about money. It was physical, geographical. The East End was literally downwind from the rest of London. The prevailing winds blew from west to east, carrying the smoke and stench from factories eastward. So the wealthy lived in the West End, breathing cleaner air, while the poor were left in the toxic cloud to the east. Picture the air you're breathing right now. Clean, right? Maybe a hint of whatever your fabric softener is. Now imagine air so thick with soot and chemicals that it coats your lungs, makes you cough constantly, stains your skin grey. That's East End air. As you step out into the street, the full sensory assault of the East End hits you. The narrow roads are already crowded with people heading to work. The cobblestones are slick with a film of, well, let's not examine too closely what makes them slick. Horse dung certainly, human waste probably, industrial runoff definitely. The noise is constant. Carts rattling over uneven cobbles, factory whistles, the cries of street vendors already setting up, the wailing of hungry children, and beneath it all the ever-present coughing, the London throat they call it, from years of breathing poisoned air. Watch yourself, your father warns, as you pass an alley where men lie unconscious from last night's gin. Alcohol is one of the few escapes available, and many take it. Gin is cheap, cheaper than clean water sometimes. Gin shops, or gin palaces as they're ironically called, dot the East End. Their gaudy facades are stark contrast to the grim surroundings. You step carefully around the prone figures. Getting robbed is a constant threat, but the truly dangerous ones are those still awake and desperate enough to do anything for their next drink. The streets grow more crowded as you near the factory district. Children as young as 5 or 6 scurry past, heads down, already late for their shifts. Many will work 14 hours today, operating dangerous machinery, breathing toxic fumes for pennies. The lucky ones have all their fingers. There's the new girl from upstairs, your sister whispers, nodding toward a thin child hurrying along. Started at the match factory yesterday, cried all night from the burns. The match factories are notorious. The white phosphorus used in making lucifer matches is highly toxic, causing painful sores, hair loss, and eventually the dreaded phossy jaw, where the jawbone literally rots away. But the work pays, and paying work is all that matters. Your factory looms ahead, a hulking brick building belching black smoke from multiple chimneys. The windows are few and small, keeping in the heat necessary for the machines, but turning the interior into a sweltering hell even in winter. The foreman stands at the entrance, checking pocket watches against the factory clock. "You're late," he barks at a woman rushing past you. "Dock her an hour's wage," he tells his assistant. Being late costs you, being sick costs you, talking costs you, using the privy too often costs you. Everything is a chance for the factory to whittle away your already meagre earnings. You shuffle inside with the crowd, the heat and noise hitting you like a physical force. The machines are already running, massive iron beasts that seem to consume human bodies as fuel. And in a way, they do. Accidents are common. Fingers caught in gears, hair pulled into belts, limbs crushed. There's no compensation, no medical care. If you're badly injured, you're simply replaced. To your station, the floor manager shouts, slapping a cane against his palm. Children flinch at the sound. They know what that cane feels like. Your spot is at a spinning frame, feeding cotton into the hungry machine for 14 hours, breathing in cotton dust that will eventually scar your lungs. But you're one of the lucky ones. You're not in the carding room, where the air is so thick with fibres that workers often don't live past 30. You're not in the bleaching section, where chlorine fumes burn eyes and throats. The factory day begins as it always does and will continue until 9 tonight. The noise makes conversation impossible. The heat makes you dizzy. The monotony makes you numb. This is survival in the East End. Not living, just surviving. But here's the thing about humans. We adapt. Even in these hellish conditions, people found ways to connect, to help each other, to create moments of joy. Children invented games played in the precious few minutes of break time. Women formed informal support networks, watching each other's children, sharing what little food they had, caring for the sick. In the East End, you survived because others helped you survive. No one made it alone. Psst, the girl next to you hisses, barely audible over the machines. She slips you a small bundle, a scrap of bread saved from her own meagre breakfast. You missed your crust this morning, rushing to the water pump, and she noticed. This small kindness might be the difference between finishing your shift standing or collapsing from hunger. These are the moments that humanized an inhuman existence. The shared crust of bread, the warning about a dangerous foreman, the hand offered in the dark. Without these small mercies, the East End would have devoured itself. As the day grinds on, your hands move automatically while your mind wanders. You dream of escape, as all East Enders do, not of wealth or luxury. Those concepts are too remote to even imagine, but of enough. Enough food, enough warmth, enough space, enough time to rest. For some, escape came through education. Ragged schools, charitable institutions for the poorest children offered basic literacy that might lead to slightly better work. For others, it was crime, a risky but potentially profitable alternative to grinding factory labour. For many women, it was marriage to a skilled tradesman, someone who earned just enough to keep a family from destitution. But for most, there was no escape. The East End was a trap, a generational cycle of poverty so profound that climbing out required extraordinary luck or extraordinary sacrifice. The factory bell finally rings, signalling the brief midday break. 20 minutes to rest, to eat whatever you've brought. For many, nothing at all, and then back to the machines. You stretch your cramping fingers, back aching from hours of the same repetitive motion. The girl who shared her bread smiles tiredly. My mum says there's work coming to the docks tomorrow, she says. Big shipment, might be extra shifts. Extra shifts mean extra pay, but also extra exhaustion. Still, no one would turn it down. In the constant mathematics of survival, more work always equals better chances. Outside the factory windows, you can see a thin slice of sky between the buildings. It's the same grey as the smoke, as the faces around you, as the future stretching ahead. But it's still sky, and sometimes, rarely, the sun breaks through. That's what keeps you going, not hope for a better life. Hope is a luxury you can't afford, but the small moments of light in the darkness, the shared bread, the warning about cholera on Dorset Street that might save your family, the extra dock work tomorrow. In the East End, you measure survival 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week at a time, and somehow, against all odds, survive you do. The midday bell ends too soon. Back to the machines, back to the noise and heat and dust. Your stomach growls. The small piece of bread barely touched your hunger, but hunger is a familiar companion, one you've learned to live with. As you take your place at the spinning frame, you glance around at the faces of your fellow workers, exhausted, resigned, determined, each with their own story, their own struggles, their own small victories. This is your community, bound together by shared suffering and resilience. In the coming hours, you'll continue to work, your body aching, your mind dulled by monotony. Later, you'll return to your crowded room, to another meagre meal, to sleep pressed against siblings and parents before waking to do it all again tomorrow. This is life in the East End. This is survival on the margins. This is what it means to be poor in the wealthiest city in the world. The machines roar back to life, drowning out all thought, all feeling, just movement now, the rhythm of survival carrying you through another day in Victorian London's forgotten East. The factory whistle cuts through the air, signalling the end of your 14-hour shift. Your hands are raw, your back screaming in protest as you finally straighten up. The relief of stopping work battles with the dread of stepping outside. Night in the East End is a different kind of monster. You file out with the other workers, a mass exodus of exhausted bodies. The February sky is already pitch black at 9 p.m, the narrow streets now transformed into shadowy corridors punctuated by the weak glow of gas lamps. Each lamp creates a small island of dirty yellow light that barely penetrates the thick fog, a mixture of river mist and coal smoke that Londoners call the pea super. "Stay close," your father mutters, appearing at the factory gates to walk you home. Even men don't walk alone after dark if they can help it. The East End at night is when the desperate get more desperate, when those who've found no work all day turn to other means of survival. When the gin-soaked and hungry prowl for anything, or anyone, that might be turned into a meal or a drink. "Oi, Watkins," a voice calls from the shadows. Your father tenses, then relaxes as he recognises Barker, a fellow docker. "Any word on tomorrow's ships?" "American trader coming in at dawn," your father replies. "They'll need 50 men, maybe more." Barker nods, the unspoken understanding passing between them. They'll both be at the docks by 4 a.m, fighting for a chance at work among hundreds of other desperate men. This is how information travels in the East End, through whispers at factory gates, in pub corners, between neighbours sharing a water pump. There are no newspapers for the poor, no posted notices that matter to you. Survival depends on this web of shared knowledge. You walk quickly, head down, past the pubs already overflowing with workers spending precious pennies to forget their lives for a few hours. The sound of bawdy singing mixes with arguments and the occasional crash of breaking glass. "Keep walking," your mother always says. "Nothing good happens to those who linger." The streets get narrower as you enter your neighbourhood, the buildings leaning toward each other like drunks supporting one another. The main road gives way to a maze of alleys and courts, dead ends and twisted passages that only locals can navigate. One wrong turn, and even in this small area you could find yourself in territory where your face isn't known and strangers aren't welcome. "Look sharp," your father whispers, pulling you closer as you pass a group of men huddled around a small fire in a metal barrel. Their eyes follow you, calculating, weighing whether you have anything worth taking. The smell changes too, from the general London stink to the specific reek of your neighbourhood. Each slum area has its own unique bouquet of misery. Yours includes the tannery 2 streets over, the slaughterhouse whose waste runs in the gutters, and the peculiar sour smell of too many bodies pressed into too little space. "Will there be supper?" you ask, your stomach growling after hours of work. Your father's silence is answer enough. Bad days at the docks mean empty stomachs. Factory pay comes at the end of the week, and last week's already ran out. Tonight will be one of those nights when sleep becomes the only available escape from hunger. You turn into your court, not a courtyard in any proper sense, but a narrow space between buildings where several tiny homes face each other across 10 feet of perpetually damp cobblestones. Home, such as it is. Inside, the single room is almost warm, your mother having maintained the small coal fire throughout the day. She looks up from where she's mending clothes by the meagre light, her face lined beyond her 30 years. "Any luck?" she asks your father. He shakes his head. "Tomorrow, maybe. American trader coming in." She nods and returns to her sewing. This conversation has happened hundreds of times, will happen hundreds more. The endless uncertainty of daily labour. Your younger siblings are already asleep on the shared bed, their thin bodies taking up less space than they should for their ages. The youngest, only 4, coughs in her sleep, that deep rattling cough that everyone pretends not to worry about. "Mrs. Finch's boy died of that cough last month," your sister whispers as she helps your mother with the mending. The words hang in the air, unacknowledged. Consumption, they call it. Tuberculosis, if you're fancy, the white plague that turns strong bodies to wasted shadows, that stains handkerchiefs with blood, that fills the paupers' graves. In the damp, crowded conditions of the East End, it spreads like gossip. "Mr. Cooper was asking after the rent," your mother says quietly, eyes on her needle. "Says he'll be round tomorrow, expects the full amount." Your father's jaw tightens. Cooper is the rent collector for your building, not the owner, who is some gentleman you've never seen who owns half the street, but his agent. Cooper enjoys his small power, enjoys the fear he creates, enjoys evicting families who fall behind. "I'll have it," your father says with more confidence than any of you feel. "If I get work tomorrow, I'll have it." If, always if. Everything in the East End exists in the realm of if. If there's work, if the fever passes, if the landlord gives another day's grace, if the winter isn't too harsh, if the bread prices don't rise again, you sit on the edge of the bed, careful not to wake the little ones, and pull off your boots. Your stockings are damp with sweat and God knows what from the factory floor, but there's no changing them. Clean clothes are a Sunday luxury, and today is only Tuesday. "Got something," your mother says suddenly, reaching into her apron pocket. She pulls out a small bundle wrapped in paper, half a loaf of bread, already going stale, and a tiny piece of cheese. You all stare at this treasure, mouths watering. "Mrs. Bryant next door," she explains. "Her son got work at the brewery, brought home extra." This is how the East End survives. These small acts of sharing between those who have nothing to spare. Today, Mrs. Bryant shares her son's good fortune. Tomorrow, if your father gets work, you might share with her. The mathematics of communal survival. Your mother divides the food with surgical precision. Larger pieces for your father and the older children who work. Smaller for the young ones who need less but are still growing. A middling piece for herself. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, making it last. The bread is rough and the cheese sharp, but in this moment it's the finest meal in London. "I heard they're clearing out Palmer Street next month," your father says between careful bites. "Building new dwellings." "Philanthropy?" your mother asks sceptically. He shrugs. "So they say, but the rents will be double. None of those families will be going back." This is the pattern you've seen your whole life. The worst slums occasionally get cleared in the name of improvement, but the new buildings are never for people like you. The displaced families just crowd into the next neighbourhood, making those conditions worse. And the cycle continues. "The Parkers are going to the workhouse," your sister says quietly. "Mr. Parker's lung fever isn't getting better, and they can't make rent." The room falls silent. The workhouse. the most dreaded destination for any East End family. Better to starve together than survive apart. Wasn't always like this, your father says after a long silence. My father remembered when this was all fields, before the factories came, before the docks expanded. Used to be countryside here, if you can believe it. You can't, really. Your whole world is brick and cobblestone, smoke and fog. Fields are something from stories. Think the factories will ever leave, you ask. Your father laughs, but there's no humour in it. And go where? London needs its dark corners, needs somewhere to stick its dirty work and its dirty workers. He's right, of course, the grand houses of West London, the shops of Oxford Street, the gentlemen's clubs of Pall Mall, they all depend on goods flowing through the East End docks, on products made in East End factories, on services provided by East End hands. Get some sleep, your mother says, putting away her mending. Early start tomorrow. Sleep comes in shifts in your family. With only one bed, you all have assigned times and positions. The youngest children sleep through the night. Your parents take the outside edges, protecting the little ones in the middle. You and your older sister will sleep for a few hours now, then wake in the night to give your parents a turn. No one sleeps well in this arrangement, but everyone sleeps some. Another calculation of survival. You wedge yourself into the small space left on the bed, your body finding the familiar dips in the thin mattress. Despite the discomfort, exhaustion pulls at you immediately. The last thing you hear is that worrying cough from your youngest sister. Sleep in the East End is never peaceful. The walls are too thin, the outside world too close. Through the night, you half wake to the sounds of arguments, of drunks staggering home, of someone crying, of the night soil men collecting waste from cesspits. And then, too soon, your mother's hand on your shoulder. Up now, she whispers. Let your father sleep. You slide from the warmth of the bed into the cold room. The fire has died to embers, and the February chill has crept in through every crack and gap in the ancient walls. Your breath makes clouds in the darkness. Your father has been in bed barely 3 hours, but he'll be up again at 3:30 to reach the docks before dawn. For now, he and your mother trade places, the bed creaking as weight shifts. She'll get maybe 4 hours before she needs to start the day's work. Laundry for the slightly better off families a few streets over, mending for neighbours who can spare a penny, caring for the younger children, keeping your one room livable. You sit by the dying fire, adding a precious few pieces of coal from the dwindling supply, not enough to really warm the room, just enough to keep the worst of the cold at bay. Your older sister joins you, and you both sit in comfortable silence, this quiet night watch, a familiar ritual. "What do you think it's like?" she asks suddenly. "In the West End?" You consider this. The West End might as well be another country, though it's only a few miles away. You've heard stories about homes with multiple rooms for single families, about clean water flowing from taps inside the house, about streets washed daily and swept clean of dung and debris. Can't imagine, you answer honestly. Probably not real the way they say. She nods. Sarah went there once to deliver laundry to a big house, says the street was wide as a field and there were trees growing right out of the pavement. Trees in the street. It sounds like a fairy tale. Says the lady of the house had a room just for bathing. Your sister continues, her voice hushed with wonder. With hot water whenever she wants it. Now you know she's exaggerating. Hot water on demand. Impossible. This is what the East End does to you. Limits your imagination to what you know, makes luxuries of necessities, turns basic comforts into unbelievable fantasies. We should try to sleep a bit, you say, nodding toward the single wooden chair where you'll both attempt to doze for a few hours. It's hardly comfortable, but it's better than the floor. Your sister squeezes beside you, her thin body providing a little extra warmth. You lean your heads together and close your eyes, drifting in and out of shallow sleep. Before you know it, the room is stirring again. Your father rises silently, dresses in the dark, and slips out to join the press of men at the dock gates. Your mother follows soon after, stoking the fire to life and putting water on to boil for tea. Not real tea, but the twice-used leaves from yesterday, just enough to add colour and the ghost of flavour to hot water. By 5:30, the whole family is awake. The younger children prepare for school, the free ragged school a few streets away, or for work depending on their ages. Education is seen as a luxury by many East End families who need every member earning, but your parents insist on at least basic schooling for the little ones. Need to read and cipher, your father always says, or they'll cheat you blind. He should know. His own lack of education has cost him dearly over the years, in underpaid work, in signed contracts he didn't understand, in missed opportunities because he couldn't read the notices. Breakfast is a cup of weak tea and, if you're lucky, a crust of bread. Today, there's no bread, so the tea must do. Your stomach has learned not to expect more. As morning light struggles through the dirty window, you notice your youngest sister's face seems flushed, her breathing faster than normal. She's burning up, your mother says, feeling the child's forehead. The worry in her voice is clear to everyone. Fever in the East End isn't just illness, it's terror. It could be anything. Typhoid from the contaminated water, diphtheria spreading through the crowded courts, scarlet fever passed between children at school. Whatever it is, medicine is a distant dream. Doctors don't come to homes like yours. The free dispensaries are overflowing with the sick, require hours of waiting, and often run out of medicines before half the day's patients are seen. I'll stop at the parish nurse after my shift, you promise. The parish nurses aren't doctors, but they have some knowledge, sometimes even medicines. Your mother nods, already calculating the day's new challenges. Someone will need to stay with the sick child, work will be missed, income will be lost. The precarious balance of survival shifts again. Cooper will be round for the rent, she reminds you. I know, you say, though there's nothing any of you can do about it now. Either your father will find work today, or he won't. Either you'll have the rent, or you won't. Outside, the East End is coming to life in the weak February dawn. The streets fill with workers heading to factories, to workshops, to the docks, to anywhere that might provide a day's wage. Children run errands or head to school or set up stalls to sell matches, flowers, bootlaces, anything to earn a few pennies. The air is thick with coal smoke from thousands of small fires, the famous London fog already building. It's not just weather, it's pollution so dense it blocks the sun, coats the lungs, stains buildings black. In the worst fogs, people literally lose their way in familiar streets, or choke to death on the toxic air. But today, the fog is just the usual grey blanket, and you navigate to the factory by memory, joining the stream of workers at the gate. Another day, another 14 hours at the machines. Your hands already ache at the thought, the cotton dust already tickling your throat. Heard about Palmer Street? A girl asks as you take your place at the spinning frame. The clearance? Yeah. She nods. My cousin lives there, says the new buildings are for deserving workers, meaning not the likes of them. Where will they go? She shrugs. Squeeze in with family, if they're lucky. Doss houses, if they can scrape together the coin. Streets, if they can't. This is another face of East End survival. The constant displacement. The shuffling of the poor from one overcrowded area to another as the city evolves around them. The machines roar to life and conversation becomes impossible. Your mind wanders as your hands work, thinking about your sister's fever, about the rent collector's visit, about your father at the docks. So many ways for the day to go wrong, so few for it to go right. And yet, in this grim calculation, there is hope. Not the bright, shining hope of fairy tales, but the stubborn, everyday hope of the East End. The hope that says, we've survived this long, we'll survive another day. The hope embedded in each small kindness between neighbours. Each shared crust of bread, each warning passed along about disease or danger. The machines thunder on, the cotton dust swirls, and outside, London continues its two separate existences, the gleaming West End of wealth and leisure, and the shadow city of the East, where you and millions like you fight for one more day of survival. The factory whistle blares, marking midday break. 20 precious minutes to rest your hands, to gulp down whatever counts as lunch, to exchange whispered news with fellow workers before the machines roar back to life. But today, there's no relief in the short reprieve. Your mind is fixed on home, on your little sister's flushed face, on the rent collector who'll be making his rounds. You look worried sick, says Mary, the girl at the next machine. Her face is grey with cotton dust, but her eyes are sharp. Nothing escapes Mary. Sister's got the fever, you mutter, and Cooper's coming for the rent. She winces. Everyone knows Cooper. Everyone fears him. Try Weiss the pawnbroker, she suggests. He's a fair one, gives decent value, not like that thief Barnett. The pawnbroker, last resort of the desperate first stop for most EastEnders by month's end. You mentally catalogue your family's meagre possessions. Your mother's wedding band is already in hock from the last crisis. Your father's good boots, the ones for church and funerals, might fetch enough to cover half the rent. What else? The blanket, maybe. You'd freeze, but you'd have a roof. Thanks, you tell Mary. Might have to. Outside the factory windows, a rare patch of blue appears in the hazy sky. Sunday is tomorrow, your only day of rest. If you survive until then, when the whistle signals the end of break, you return to your machine with renewed determination. Every minute is coins, every hour is survival. By late afternoon, a new worry emerges. Your chest feels tight, breathing becomes an effort. The cotton dust, always present, always dangerous, seems thicker today, or perhaps your resistance is lower from hunger and worry. You cough, trying to be discreet. Getting noticed for weakness is dangerous. The floor manager watches for any sign of failing productivity, any excuse to dock wages or replace workers. There are always more bodies desperate for your position. Don't let Simmons see you coughing, hisses the boy on your left. Jenkins got sacked last week for it. You nod gratefully, swallowing the next cough, feeling it burn in your chest. This is the hidden cost of East End labour, not just the meagre wages, the endless hours, but the slow poisoning of bodies. Cotton dust fills the lungs of textile workers. Lead destroys the minds of painters and pottery workers. Phosphorus dissolves the jawbones of match girls. Mercury maddens hat makers. Every industry has its preferred method of killing workers. My cousin worked the white lead, Mary had told you once. 17 she was. Pretty girl. Then her gums went blue, hands started shaking, brain went funny, dead before 18. No one talks of workplace safety, of protective measures, of limiting toxic exposure. Bodies are cheap and plentiful in the East End. When the final whistle blows, you stumble out with the others, lungs burning, head pounding. The parish nurse, you promise to visit her for your sister, but first the pawnbroker. Weiss's shop sits on the corner of two narrow streets, its three brass balls hanging above the door, universal symbol of pawned hopes. Inside, the shelves are packed with the surrendered treasures of the East End: wedding rings and Sunday coats, Bibles and children's toys, tools and blankets and family heirlooms. Each item represents a crisis, a moment when need outweighed sentiment. "Yes?" Weiss asks, eyeing you from behind his counter. He's not unkind, just cautious. Pawnbrokers in the East End must be careful judges of character and value. You pull out your father's good boots, wrapped in a scrap of cloth to keep them clean. They're worn but solid, the leather cracked but not split. Your father will be devastated. These boots are part of his dignity, the one thing that lets him present himself as more than a desperate dock worker on Sundays. Weiss examines them carefully, turning them over in his hands. 3 shillings, he offers. It's a fair price. More than fair, really, but the rent is 7 shillings. Need more, you say quietly, for the rent. Weiss studies your face, seeing the desperation you're trying to hide. He sighs, reaching under the counter for his cash box. 4 shillings, 6pence, he says finally, and only because your father is an honest man. Bring the ticket and 6 shillings by next month, you get them back. The redemption price is reasonable, just enough profit to keep Weiss in business, not so much as to be impossible. This is how the fair pawnbrokers operate, part of the East End's survival ecosystem. Thank you, you say, pocketing the coins. They feel heavy with your father's sacrifice. Outside, the streets have transformed into the evening market. While you worked, the costermongers and street vendors have set up their stalls and carts along both sides of the main road. This is when the East End becomes something close to vibrant, a riot of shouts and smells and colours. "Eels, hot eels," calls a man with a steaming pot. "Oranges sweet as summer," cries a woman with a basket of fruit. "Flowers for your sweetheart," shouts a girl with wilting blooms. The market is the beating heart of East End life. Here, food is sold in portions small enough for the poorest to afford. A single egg, half a loaf, a spoonful of tea. Here, gossip and news flow freely between neighbours. Here, for a few hours each evening, the grinding poverty recedes just slightly as the community comes together. You navigate through the press of bodies, the noise, the competing smells of food and humanity. 4 shillings won't pay the full rent, but it might buy Cooper's patience for a few days, and you can spare a penny for medicine from the parish nurse. The nurse's quarters are attached to the local church, a small room where the desperate bring their ailments. She's not a doctor, no proper doctor would work in the East End, but she has more knowledge than most, and occasionally actual medicines. "Another fever case?" she asks tiredly when you describe your sister's symptoms. She sees dozens every day. "Started this morning," you explain. "She's 4, small for her age." The nurse nods, reaching for a brown bottle. "Willow bark tincture, 2 drops in water, morning and night. Keep her cool if you can. If the fever hasn't broken in 3 days." She doesn't finish. You both know what happens after 3 days of high fever. You place your precious penny on her table and accept the tiny bottle, tucking it carefully into your pocket. One crisis addressed, one to go. The rent collector won't come until evening. He likes to catch people at supper, when families are together, when the embarrassment of failure has the largest audience. You have time to check the docs, to see if your father found work. The Thames is the reason for the East End's existence, the great artery of empire, bringing goods from every corner of the world through the port of London. The docks are massive, sprawling structures where ships unload their cargoes day and night, where thousands of men compete for the chance to break their backs moving crates and barrels for pitiful wages. You stand at the edge of the dock area. Women aren't allowed inside without specific business. The day shift is ending, tired men streaming out through the gates. You scan faces anxiously, looking for your father. "He found work," says a voice beside you. "It's Barker, your father's friend from yesterday. American trader, like we heard. He's still inside. They're paying now." Relief floods through you. A full day's wage at the docks. Not a fortune, but enough. Combined with what you got from the pawnbroker, the rent is covered. One more day of keeping the roof. "Thank you," you tell Barker. He nods and moves on. A small kindness from one dock family to another. You head home, weaving through streets now growing dark. Gas lamps cast pools of yellow light at wide intervals, leaving long stretches of shadow between them. Moving quickly but carefully, you stick to the sides of buildings, avoiding the open centre of streets where night soil and refuse make a treacherous path. Home is chaos when you arrive. Your sister's fever has worsened, her small body radiating heat like a furnace. Your mother is trying to cool her with damp cloths, but the water from the communal pump is tepid at best. "Got medicine," you say, producing the bottle. Your mother looks up, relief and exhaustion battling on her face. "Bless you. Cooper's been by already, says he'll return after 8. You hand over the money from Weiss. "Dad found work today. He'll have more." She doesn't ask about the source of the coins. Some questions are better unasked in the East End. She just nods and returns to tending your sister. The other children crowd around the small table, sharing a loaf of bread your mother must have purchased with the last of yesterday's money. Their eyes follow the food with the particular intensity of the chronically hungry. Even the most active children grow quiet at mealtimes in poor homes. Every crumb matters too much for childish waste. "Did you eat today?" your mother asks, not looking up from her nursing. "At the factory," you lie. She has enough worries without adding your hunger. The room feels different tonight, the familiar poverty now overshadowed by the real possibility of loss. Child mortality in the East End is horrifically common. In some neighbourhoods, 1 in every 2 children dies before age 5. You've all seen it before. The small coffins carried to the pauper's field, the grief-hollowed eyes of parents, the empty spaces at crowded tables. No one speaks of it directly. To name the fear would give it power. Your father arrives an hour later, face grey with exhaustion but eyes bright with triumph. He places his day's wage on the table, 4 shillings and 8 pence for 14 hours of loading cargo. "Got steady work for the week," he announces. "Ship's full to bursting. They need men through Saturday." This is the closest thing to security the East End offers, the promise of 5 more days of work. Your mother meets his eyes, a moment of shared relief passing between them. Then he notices the sick child, and the moment breaks. "How long?" he asks quietly. "Since morning," your mother replies. "Sarah brought medicine." He nods, moving to the bedside, his large hand gentle on the small, hot forehead. "My brave girl," he murmurs. The family falls into the rhythm of crisis, your mother tending the sick child, your father handling the younger ones, you and your older siblings preparing for Cooper's return. The money is counted 3 times, placed in plain sight on the table, a defence against accusations of holding back. When Cooper's heavy knock comes, the room falls silent. Your father opens the door. Cooper is neither the worst nor the best of his kind, a middle-aged man with the perpetual scowl of someone who collects others' misery for a living. He's not actively cruel, but neither is he capable of true compassion. The East End has worn away whatever empathy he might once have had. "Rent day, Watkins," he says, stepping inside without invitation, his eyes sweeping the room, cataloguing potential valuables with professional speed. 7 shillings, your father replies, gesturing to the table where the coins are arranged. Cooper counts them slowly, making a show of examining each for authenticity, though they both know the money is good. Power displays are part of the ritual. All here, he admits, finally, scooping the coins into a leather pouch. His gaze falls on the sick child. Fever, is it? Your mother nods tightly. Keep it away from the other tenants, Cooper says. Mr. Thornton doesn't like sickness in his buildings. Bad for business. The casual cruelty of the statement hangs in the air, as if your family chose illness, as if disease respects property lines in the packed tenements of the East End. Cooper leaves without another word, moving on to the next family, the next collection, the next small drama of survival. With his departure, the tension breaks. The rent is paid. The roof is secure for another week. One crisis navigated, leaving only the fever to fight. You should eat, your mother tells your father, offering him a share of the bread. He takes it gratefully, his movements slow with exhaustion. Dock work is brutal, loading and unloading heavy cargo for hours without breaks, often in dangerous conditions. Men die regularly from accidents, from collapsed stacks of goods, from falls into the Thames where the current is deadly. Sarah, he says between careful bites, you pawned my boots. It's not a question. There's no way the factory wage alone could have covered the rent shortfall. Vice gave fair price, you answer. 4 and 6, we can redeem them next month. He nods, not angry, but sad. Those boots represented something to him. Respectability, perhaps, or the memory of better times. You did right, he assures you. Roof first, always. This is the education of the East End, the harsh lessons of priority. Roof first, food second, heat third, everything else is luxury. As evening deepens into night, your sick sister's fever seems to plateau. Not better, but not worse. The willow bark tincture, essentially just aspirin in raw form, helps reduce the inflammation. Your mother sits beside her through the night, applying cool cloths, administering tiny sips of medicine-laced water. The rest of you prepare for sleep in the familiar arrangement, parents and small children in the bed, older siblings taking shifts on the floor or the single chair. Tomorrow is Sunday, your only day without factory work, though your father will still go to the docks. The American trader doesn't observe the Sabbath, and neither can those desperate for its work. Sleep comes in fits and starts, interrupted by your sister's occasional whimpers, by the usual noises of the crowded building, by your own hunger and worry. Your chest still feels tight from the cotton dust, a persistent cough threatening to break free. Dawn brings unexpected brightness, one of those rare London winter days when the sun cuts through the smoke and fog. The light streams through your grimy window, illuminating the tiny room in surprising detail, the cracks in the walls, the patches on the blanket, the thin faces of your siblings. The room both is and isn't home, a space too small for human dignity but filled with the fierce love of a family determined to stay together. Your sister's fever has broken in the night. She's weak but cooler, her breathing easier, one small victory in the endless battle. Sunday in the East End has its own peculiar character. For those with religious inclinations, the churches and chapels fill, though many avoid them out of shame for their ragged clothes or resentment of the middle-class morality often preached at the poor. For others, it's the one day to catch up on home repairs, on washing clothes, on the 1,000 small tasks impossible after 14-hour workdays. And for some, Sunday means Petticoat Lane Market, the greatest of the East End street markets where anything and everything can be found for the right price. Take the little ones to the market, your mother suggests. Get some air while this sunshine lasts. She doesn't need to add that having fewer bodies in the small room will help your recovering sister. Outside, the East End looks almost cheerful in the winter sunshine. The perpetual grime is still there, but somehow less oppressive. The rare good weather has brought people out of their cramped rooms, creating an impromptu street festival atmosphere. Petticoat Lane isn't a lane at all, but a network of streets and alleys transformed every Sunday into a vast, chaotic bazaar. Here, the full diversity of East End life is on display. Jewish traders sell fabric alongside Irish vendors with potatoes. Cockney butchers hawk questionable cuts of meat next to Italian ice cream sellers. Chinese sailors offer exotic trinkets from the Far East, while gypsies tell fortunes for pennies. Look but don't touch, you warn your younger siblings. The market has its own rules, its own dangers. Pickpockets work the crowd, unscrupulous vendors sell tainted food, fights erupt over perceived slights or territorial disputes, but it's also magical in its way, a kaleidoscope of humanity, of ingenuity, of the stubborn determination to create commerce and community in the harshest conditions. Apples halfpenny each, calls a woman with a basket. You have no money, but looking costs nothing. Your siblings dart from stall to stall, wide-eyed at the offerings, used toys and brass buttons, second-hand books and bright ribbons, exotic spices and familiar comforts. Sarah, a voice calls from the crowd. It's Mary from the factory, waving you over to a fabric stall. Come see. You follow, curious. Mary stands with an older woman, clearly her mother, examining a bolt of blue cotton. My sister's getting married, Mary explains. Mum's making her a dress. The fabric is simple but pretty, the colour vibrant against the general greyness of East End attire, a luxury by local standards representing weeks of saved pennies. It's lovely, you say, genuinely admiring. Moments of joy, of celebration, are precious here. How's your sister? Mary asks. The fever? Broke in the night. She's weak, but better. Mary's mother nods with the wisdom of someone who's nursed many sick children. Keep her drinking. Water with a bit of sugar if you have it. Builds strength. This free medical advice, passed between women, is often more practical than what doctors offer, when doctors can be found at all in the East End. Thank you, you say. I'll tell my mother. As you turn to collect your siblings, a commotion erupts at the edge of the market. People scatter, voices rise in alarm. Instinctively, you grab the children, pulling them close. Police raid, mutters a man beside you, already melting away into a side alley. The police are a complex presence in the East End, feared more than respected, seen as protectors of property rather than people. Raids on the Sunday market are common, targeting unlicensed vendors or those selling stolen goods. But this doesn't appear to be a general raid. The officers, 4 of them in their distinctive uniforms, move purposefully through the crowd toward a specific target. Cholera, whispers someone nearby. They're looking for the source. The word sends a chill through the gathering. Cholera, the most dreaded of East End diseases, capable of killing within hours, spreading through contaminated water. The symptoms are horrific: violent vomiting, uncontrollable diarrhea, agonizing cramps, the body literally drying out as fluids pour from both ends. Where? You ask urgently. Dorset Street. 3 cases since yesterday. Dorset Street, barely 10 minutes' walk from your home, drawing water from the same sources. You gather your siblings closer. We're going home, you announce, now. As you hurry back through the winding streets, the brief holiday atmosphere of the sunny Sunday evaporates. Cholera changes everything. It's not like the constant background threats of tuberculosis or typhoid, slower killers that the East End has learned to live alongside. Cholera is immediate, dramatic, and terrifying. The street where you live is already buzzing with the news when you return. Neighbours stand in doorways, exchanging information, fear barely disguised behind matter-of-fact tones. Woman and her 2 children, they say. Water from the Crown Street pump, most likely. Closing it off. They are. The whole street. Your mother meets you at the door, face tight with worry. You've heard, then? You nod, ushering the younger ones inside. Your father's gone to get clean water, she explains. From the pump on Commercial Road, they say that one's safe. Commercial Road is a mile away, a long walk carrying heavy buckets of water, but better than risking the closer pumps now suspected of contamination. Inside, your 6th sister sits propped against the wall, wan but alert. She manages a smile when she sees you. The immediate crisis of her fever has passed, but now a new threat looms over the entire neighbourhood. This is life in the East End, a constant cycle of crises, never just one challenge at a time. When the fever breaks, cholera threatens. When the rent is paid, food runs short. When work is steady, accidents happen. Survival means navigating this endless gauntlet of dangers with whatever resources you can muster: family solidarity, community knowledge, stubborn perseverance, and occasionally sheer luck. Your father returns an hour later, struggling under the weight of 2 full buckets of water. His clothes are soaked where the water has sloshed over the sides during the long walk home. Police have posted notices, he reports, setting down his burden. No water to be drawn from Crown Street or Angel Alley pumps until further notice. And when we run out of this, your mother asks, gesturing to the buckets. He has no answer. They both know that daily trips to Commercial Road are unsustainable alongside 14-hour workdays. Something will have to give, but that's tomorrow's problem. For now, there is clean water, a recovering child, another day of roof overhead. In the calculus of East End survival, that counts as victory. Outside, the rare winter sun begins its early descent, shadow reclaiming the narrow streets. Tomorrow brings Monday, and with it the return to factories and docks, to the relentless machinery of Victorian industry that both sustains and consumes the people of the East End. But for this moment, in this small room, with the immediate threats temporarily held at bay, there is a fragile peace. Your family gathers around the meagre fire, sharing the day's news, drawing strength from each other's presence. This too is the East End, not just the squalor and struggle that horrified social reformers and fascinated wealthy slummers, but the human connections forged in adversity, the stubborn insistence on finding moments of warmth and community amid the harshest conditions Victorian London could create. Monday morning comes too soon, the rhythm of East End life resuming its relentless pace. Your father is already gone when you wake. The docks start before dawn. Your mother stirs the meagre fire, heating water for the weak tea that passes for breakfast. The water's running low, she says quietly. We'll need more by evening. The cholera threat looms over this simple statement. With the local pumps condemned, water has become both precious and dangerous. A wrong choice could mean death. Your recovering sister sits propped against the wall, still weak but alert. The others gather around the small table, accepting their cups of tea with the solemn gratitude of children who already understand scarcity. Cooper says they're sealing off Dorset Street, your brother reports. He's 12 and works as a crossing sweeper, clearing paths through the horse dung and refuse so well-dressed pedestrians can cross streets without soiling their boots. His position at the crossroads makes him a valuable source of neighbourhood news. 4 more cases overnight. Your mother's face tightens. Cholera doesn't spread slowly like tuberculosis. It rips through crowded neighborhoods like wildfire, claiming dozens, then hundreds before authorities can respond. The dispensary's giving out lime powder, your brother adds, for the cesspits. Says it kills the miasma. Miasma, the bad air that most believe causes disease. Some newer doctors talk about germs instead, invisible creatures that live in dirty water, but such ideas seem far-fetched to most East Enders. What they do know is that sickness follows stench, and the East End has stench in abundance. Get some on your way home, your mother tells him. We'll do our pit tonight. The family cesspit, a hole beneath the small outhouse shared by your building, hasn't been emptied in months. The night soil men who perform this noxious task charge more than most families can spare, so the pits fill until they overflow, leaking into the soil, contaminating wells and groundwater. You finish your tea and prepare for the factory, helping your younger siblings get ready for their own work or school. Your chest feels tighter this morning, the cough harder to suppress. Cotton dust builds up in the lungs day by day, year by year, until breathing becomes a conscious effort. Old factory workers wheeze like broken bellows, their productive years numbered. Take this, your mother says, pressing a scrap of cloth into your hand. Wet it and breathe through it. Might help with the dust. You nod, knowing it's a desperate measure. The factory foremen don't allow such protections. They slow the work, they say. You'll have to hide it. Use it only when unwatched. Still, it's something. Outside, the rare Sunday sunshine has vanished, replaced by the more familiar grey drizzle that keeps London in a perpetual state of damp. The streets are already crowded with workers making their way to factories, workshops, markets and construction sites. You pass the condemned water pump, now wrapped in heavy chains, a police notice warning of penalties for use. A small crowd has gathered, women with empty buckets arguing with a bored constable. What are we supposed to do then? One demands. Commercial roads a mile off. Not my concern, ma'am, the constable replies mechanically. Take it up with the parish board. The parish board, those distant, faceless authorities who make decisions affecting thousands of East End lives from the comfort of their meeting rooms. For most residents, the board is just another incomprehensible power to be navigated, like weather or disease. The crowd disperses grudgingly. There's no point arguing, no point being late to work. The water problem, like every problem, falls to individual families to solve however they can. At the factory gate, you meet Mary, her face drawn with worry. "Did you hear about Miller?" she asks as you join the line of workers shuffling inside. "No? What?" "Caught his hand in the carding machine yesterday. Lost 3 fingers. Your stomach drops. You've seen such accidents before. The sudden scream, the blood, the mangled flesh. The victim hustled away, never to return, replaced by a fresh body within hours. What'll he do? Mary shrugs, the gesture containing all the fatalism of East End life. Begging, most like. Or the workhouse. The workhouse, always waiting at the end of misfortune's road. You think of Miller, a stocky man of 30 with a wife and 4 children, reduced to extending a maimed hand for pennies. Or worse, entering those dreaded gates where families are separated, where dignity goes to die. Mind yourselves today, the floor manager announces as workers take their stations. We've fallen behind schedule. Any slacking will be noted. Translation: work faster, no matter the risk. Accidents like Miller's are often preceded by such warnings. Speed and safety are enemies in the factory world. The machines roar to life and conversation becomes impossible. You tie your mother's cloth loosely around your neck, ready to pull it up when the floor manager's attention is elsewhere. Small rebellions are the only kind available to you. Hours blend together in the mechanical rhythm, your hands performing their tasks without conscious thought. The mind drifts, seeking escape from the noise, the heat, the cotton-choked air. You think about Miller again, about how quickly security can vanish. Yesterday a steady job, today a cripple, no savings, no protection, no recourse, just the sheer drop into deeper poverty that awaits every working family. At midday break, you pull Mary aside. Think we should do something for Miller? She looks surprised, then thoughtful, like a collection. Collections happen sometimes after accidents, workers contributing their few spare pennies to help a fallen comrade. Not enough to replace lost wages, but perhaps enough to stave off the workhouse for another week. I could ask around, you offer. Just a penny each, whatever people can spare. Mary nods slowly. I'll help. Better to do it at day's end, though, after payday. Friday is payday. Miller will need to survive until then. The afternoon drags, your chest growing tighter as dust accumulates in your lungs. You use the cloth when you can, breathing through it to filter the worst of the cotton fibres. It helps a little, though you pay for each moment of protection with anxious glances at the floor manager. When the final whistle blows, you're more exhausted than usual. The walk home feels longer, your legs heavier, but there's no rest waiting. Your mother needs water from Commercial Road. Your sister needs tending. The younger children need supervision. Home is tense when you arrive. Your father sits at the table, face dark with anger, a paper clutched in his hand. What's happened? You ask, sensing disaster. Rent's going up, he says flatly. 2 shillings more per week. The paper is a notice from the landlord, or rather from Cooper, his agent. The increase is substantial, nearly 30% more than you're currently paying. There's no justification offered, no improvements promised, just the cold reality that someone, somewhere, has decided your family should pay more for the same crumbling walls and leaking roof. Can they do that? Your mother asks, though you all know the answer. Cooper says it's happening all over, your father replies. Says we're lucky it's only 2 shillings. Marshfield Street got hit with 4. This is another reality of East End life, the complete powerlessness of tenants. No leases protect you, no regulations control, increases. The landlord's word is final, pay or leave. We can't afford it, your mother says quietly. The simple math of survival, already precarious, has just been rendered impossible. I know, your father's voice is hollow. The unspoken question hangs in the air. What now? Options are few and grim. Cut food, already at starvation levels, send another child to work, at the expense of the education that might eventually offer escape. Take in lodgers, in a space already too small for your own family. Move to an even worse area, though where is worse that still has a roof? Pastor Walsh might know of something, your mother suggests. The church sometimes has rooms. The church, that complex presence in East End life. For some families, it's a genuine source of spiritual comfort. For others, a reluctant last resort, help that comes with sermons attached. The poorest often avoid churches entirely, unwilling to be preached at about cleanliness and temperance by middle-class ministers who've never gone hungry. Your family falls somewhere in the middle, sceptical but practical. If the church has rooms at lower rent, pride can't stand in the way. I'll see him tomorrow, your father agrees, after the dock shift. Crisis temporarily deferred. You remember the water. I'll go to Commercial Road, you offer, for the water. Your mother looks at you with concern. You're tired. Your brother can go. He got the lime powder. I'll manage. You take the buckets and head back into the grey evening. The long walk to the safe pump is a solitary opportunity to think, to breathe air that isn't filled with family worry or factory dust. Commercial Road is one of the main arteries connecting the East End to the city proper. The buildings here are marginally better maintained, the streets a fraction wider, still poor by any objective standard, but a step up from your neighbourhood. The pump has a line when you arrive, others from condemned areas making the same journey. You wait your turn, exchanging nods with fellow water seekers. There's a grim solidarity in shared hardship. Here they found the source, says the woman ahead of you. Cesspit leaking into the well under the Crown Street pump. Anyone being held responsible? You ask, though you know the answer. She snorts. What do you think? Parish board says it's an act of God. Acts of God, the convenient explanation for preventable tragedies. No one mentions the landlords who neglect cesspit maintenance, the parish officials who ignore reports of contamination, the system that crams too many bodies into spaces without proper sanitation. When your turn comes, you fill your buckets carefully, wasting not a drop. The journey back will be hard, the water sloshing and growing heavier with each step, but it's clean water, or cleaner at least, and that's worth the effort. The walk back takes nearly an hour, your arms burning from the weight. Twice you have to stop and rest, placing the buckets on the ground while you shake out your aching muscles. By the time you reach home, darkness has fallen completely, the streets lit only by the occasional gas lamp. Your brother meets you at the door, taking one bucket to lighten your load. "Someone came looking for you," he says as you enter. "Who?" "Mary from the factory said Miller's wife is going door to door asking for help. She'll be by tomorrow." You nod, setting down the second bucket. The collection for Miller will need to start immediately, not wait until Friday. A family in crisis can't wait for payday. Inside, your father has already left for the night shift at the docks. The American trader is being unloaded around the clock, providing that rare commodity in the East End. Steady work. He'll labour through the night, sleep a few hours, then return for the day shift. Such double shifts are physically devastating but financially necessary. Men who work them often collapse after a week or two, their bodies simply unable to sustain the pace. But those few extra shillings might make the difference between keeping a home and losing it. Your mother is preparing supper, potatoes and onions boiled together, stretching the ingredients as far as possible. The younger children watch hungrily as she works, the smell triggering an almost Pavlovian response in chronically underfed bodies. "We'll need to collect for Miller," you tell her. "Lost fingers in the carding machine." She nods without looking up. "Your father can spare tuppence. It's all we have." 2 pennies, a substantial donation from a family facing its own crisis. But that's the East End way. Today Miller, tomorrow perhaps you. The only safety net is the one you weave together. Supper is a quiet affair, everyone too tired for much conversation. The food is bland but filling, the portions carefully distributed according to need. Larger for those who do physical labour, smaller for the young and elderly. After the meal, your mother shows you how to add lime powder to the cesspit, a foul job requiring a strong stomach. The caustic powder supposedly disinfects the waste, preventing disease. Whether it works is anyone's guess, but it feels like action, like some defense against the invisible threats surrounding you. Back inside, the evening routine continues. Clothes amended by the dim light, tomorrow's meagre lunches prepared, water rationed for washing faces and hands, but not bodies. A full bath is a once-weekly luxury, if that. The cramped room grows stuffier as the small fire dies down, the air thick with the combined breath of too many people. Outside, the familiar night sounds of the East End begin. Drunken shouts from the direction of the pub, the clatter of the night soil cart making its rounds. The occasional scream that might be pain or might be pleasure, impossible to tell through the thin walls. Sleep comes in the usual shifts, children first, parents later, older siblings taking turns. You drift off sitting upright in the chair, your exhaustion finally overwhelming the discomfort and worry. Morning arrives with grey light filtering through the window and your father's return. His face drawn with the particular exhaustion that comes from working through the night. He eats quickly, sharing the news from the docks. "They're quarantining ships from Hamburg," he reports. "Cholera's hit there too. The disease travels along trade routes, following the paths of commerce, a deadly companion to the goods that sustain London's economy. The East End, with its docks and markets receiving imports from around the world, often sees the first cases of any epidemic." "Pastor Walsh?" your mother asks. "Going this afternoon," your father confirms, already preparing for bed. He'll sleep for 4 hours, then rise for another shift. Church has rooms above the mission hall, not much, but cheaper than here. You leave him to his brief rest and prepare for the factory. Tuesday, just another day in the endless cycle. Outside, the streets have the subdued quality that follows frightening news. People move quickly, avoiding unnecessary conversation, as if cholera might be transmitted through words. At the factory gates, Mary finds you immediately. "Miller's wife is desperate," she says without preamble. "Landlord's threatening eviction. No income, 4 little ones." You nod, understanding the urgency. "I'll start asking today. 2pence from my father. I can add a penny of my own on Friday." Mary's eyes widen slightly. 3p is a significant contribution from one family, especially one facing a rent increase, but Miller would do the same for you. That's the unspoken agreement among the working poor. "I'll take the spinning room," Mary says. "You ask in carding? Deal." The collection becomes your mission for the day. Between monitoring your machine, you whisper to nearby workers, explaining Miller's situation, suggesting contributions. Most promise something, even if just a halfpenny. By midday break, you've secured commitments for nearly 2 shillings. A substantial sum in pennies and halfpennies. Mary has similar success. "The girls in finishing pledged 4p, she reports excitedly, and Andrews the mechanic gave a whole 6p. Such generosity is both surprising and not. The working class gives more proportionally than the wealthy, a documented fact that would shock the middle-class philanthropists who occasionally tour the East End, lamenting the moral failings of its residents. The factory day ends with promises of nearly 4 shillings for Miller's family, not enough to replace his lost income, but perhaps enough to prevent immediate eviction. You and Mary agree to continue tomorrow, to present the collection on Friday when people actually have coins to give. The walk home takes you past the church where Pastor Walsh presides. It's a plain brick building, modest compared to the grand churches of wealthier areas, but still imposing in the landscape of small East End dwellings. The mission hall attached to its side serves multiple functions. Sunday school, soup kitchen, meeting place for various improvement societies aimed at the poor. Your father emerges from the hall just as you pass, his face showing cautious optimism. 2 rooms above the hall, he says when you reach him, 7 shillings weekly, including coal for heat. It's a significant savings compared to your current situation, and apparently includes fuel, a major expense in winter. The catch, unspoken but understood, will be increased expectations of church attendance, of participation in the mission's activities. A fair trade, given the circumstances. "When can we move?" you ask. End of the month. Current occupants are leaving for family in Essex. A reprieve, time to prepare, to save for the moving costs, to adjust to the idea of new surroundings. Better than the immediate eviction you'd feared. You walk together in comfortable silence, both too tired for unnecessary words. The news about the rooms lifts some weight from your shoulders. One crisis navigated, though others certainly wait ahead. Home comes into view, the familiar, dilapidated building that's been your world for as long as you can remember. For all its faults, it's known, it's yours. The new rooms will be strange, will require adjustment, but there'll be a roof, will be warmer, will cost less. In the calculus of East End survival, that's a clear improvement. Inside, your mother has already heard the news from a neighbour who saw your father at the church. Her relief is palpable, her movements lighter as she prepares the evening meal. The younger children, sensing the changed mood, are more animated, more like actual children than the subdued miniature adults poverty often creates. Miller's wife came by, your mother tells you. I gave her what we could spare. You nod, unsurprised. Community support happens in multiple ways. The formal collection at the factory, the informal sharing between neighbours, the thousand small kindnesses that make survival possible. Mary and I have nearly 4 shillings promised at the factory, you report. Should have it by Friday. Good, your mother says simply. They'll need it. 2 weeks pass in a blur of factory work, dock labour and quiet preparation for the move. Your father continues his punishing double shifts at the docks, coming home only to sleep before returning. 7 dead on Thrall Street overnight, reports your brother one morning. His position as a crossing sweeper makes him a reliable source of neighbourhood news. Police have cordoned it off completely. The geography of death expands daily. Dorset Street, then Flower and Dean, now Thrall. The invisible killer creeps closer to your neighbourhood with each passing day. Miss Jenkins won't be coming back, announces your sister's teacher when you collect her from school. The fever took her last night, Miss Jenkins, barely 20, who taught the youngest class at the ragged school, who had somehow maintained a clean collar and kind smile in the harshest conditions. Gone, just like that. Did you know her well? You ask your sister as you walk home. She nods, solemn-eyed. She let me borrow her slate sometimes, said I had a quick mind. Death is so commonplace in the East End that children learn to accept it with uncanny composure. They have to. In some families, half the children born don't survive to age 5. Grief becomes another skill to master, like stretching food or avoiding rent collectors. At the factory, rumours swirl about potential closure if the epidemic worsens. Such closures have happened before, during the cholera outbreaks of 32 and 49. For factory owners, it's a simple calculation. When enough workers fall ill to affect productivity, they shutter operations until the disease burns itself out. They lose some profit. Workers lose their only income. If it closes, I'm finished, Mary confides during lunch break. My brother's already out of work. Tannery shut down yesterday. Can't lose my wage too. You squeeze her hand, having no reassurance to offer. If the factory closes, your family faces the same crisis. The docks might remain open longer. Goods must flow, epidemic or no, but even they have limits. We'll manage, you say, the automatic response of the East End poor. Whether true or not, it's what you tell yourself, what everyone tells themselves. We'll manage, somehow. The collection for Miller has grown to almost 7 shillings, an impressive sum gathered penny by penny, from people who have almost nothing themselves. On Friday, payday, you and Mary count out the coins before delivering them to his desperate family. Never seen so much money at once, Mary marvels, arranging the coins in neat stacks, enough for a month's rent almost. Won't replace his income though, you remind her, not long term. She nods soberly, nothing ever does. That's the brutal reality of industrial injury. A moment's inattention, a mechanical failure, a supervisor's pressure to work faster, and a lifetime's earning capacity vanishes. No compensation, no pension, no safety net beyond what the community can cobble together. The visit to Miller's home is both heartening and heartbreaking. His wife weeps with gratitude at the collection, while Miller himself sits stone-faced, his bandaged hand a constant reminder of his altered future. His children watch with the unnervingly adult expressions that East End hardship stamps on young faces. The church might have work, you suggest hesitantly. Pastor Walsh mentioned they need help with the soup kitchen. Not much pay, but something. Miller nods, pride visibly battling with pragmatism. I'll see him tomorrow. Walking home, Mary voices what you're both thinking. That could be any of us, any day. I know. There's nothing more to say. Factory accidents are as inevitable as rain in London. A matter of when, not if. You both return to work on Monday knowing the risk, having no choice but to take it. The final week in your old home brings unexpected emotion. For all its flaws, the drafts, the leaks, the paper-thin walls, it's the only home some of your siblings have known. Your mother finds herself running her hand along the cracked plaster walls, a gesture somewhere between farewell and good riddance. First place your father and I had after marrying, she says quietly. Thought it was temporary then. 10 years ago now. A decade in one room, raising children, fighting illness, stretching pennies. The story of countless East End families, temporary arrangements that become permanent through lack of alternatives. Moving day arrives with spring's first real warmth. March sunshine, weak but welcome, streams through windows as you pack the family's meagre possessions. Everything fits in bundles carried by hand. No need for carts or wagons when you own so little. Clothes, cooking pots, the precious second blanket, a few books for the children learning to read. The sum total of a family's existence, easily transported in a single trip. The church rooms, when you finally enter them, provoke mixed reactions. They're larger than your old space, 2 proper rooms instead of 1. The ceilings are higher, the windows bigger, allowing more light. There's a small stove in the main room, already stocked with coal as promised. But they're also institutional. Plain whitewashed walls, bare wooden floors, the unmistakable feeling of charity rather than home, and they sit directly above the mission hall, where hymns and sermons and temperance meetings will punctuate your daily life. It's clean, your mother says definitively, setting down her bundle, and warm. The rest we'll manage. The family sets about arranging the space, claiming corners, establishing the new geography of daily life. The larger room will serve as living area and kitchen, the smaller as bedroom, still crowded with the whole family sleeping there, but less so than before. A knock at the door reveals Pastor Walsh's wife, bearing what she clearly considers a housewarming gift, a Bible and a pamphlet titled Domestic Economy for Working Families. "We're so pleased to have you with us," she says, her smile genuine if somewhat condescending. "I've marked some particularly helpful passages about household management." Your mother accepts both with careful politeness. The power dynamic is clear. You are recipients of charity, expected to show proper gratitude and, more importantly, proper improvement. The reduced rent comes with implicit expectations of moral and social elevation. Mrs. Walsh glances around the room, her expression a mixture of sympathy and judgment. I've put your name down for the mothers' meeting on Thursdays. We discuss proper nutrition and childcare. Very enlightening. Thank you. Your mother replies, her face revealing nothing of her thoughts on being instructed in motherhood by a childless clergyman's wife. After Mrs. Walsh leaves, promising further visits, your mother silently places the Bible on the small shelf and tucks the pamphlet out of sight. She'll attend the meetings, the reduced rent requires certain compromises, but there are limits to compliance. Right, she says briskly. Let's get this place sorted before your father's home. The work of settling in provides distraction from the mixed feelings about your new circumstances. By evening, when your father returns from the docks, the rooms have taken on some semblance of home. The familiar objects, few as they are, help bridge the gap between old space and new. Your father surveys the result with approval. More room to breathe, he observes, and warmer already. He's right. The difference in temperature is noticeable. The church building is newer, better constructed, with fewer drafts. For the first time in months, the constant chill that pervaded your old room is absent. That night, the family sleeps better than they have in years. The extra space means less crowding. The warmth means deeper rest. Even the church bells marking the hours seem like a fair trade for the drunken shouts and fights that punctuated nights in your old neighbourhood. Morning brings a new routine, different water pump, different route to work, different neighbours. The church building houses 4 other families in similar circumstances, all navigating the careful balance between genuine need and the expectations attached to charity. You meet one such neighbour as you prepare to leave for the factory, a tired-looking woman with 3 small children clinging to her skirts. Ellen Barnes, she introduces herself, from Whitechapel Way. My Tom works the railway. Sarah Watkins, you reply, factory worker. My father's at the docks. This simple exchange of occupations establishes the basics of East End identity. What you do, what your family does, these define you more than names or origins. Been here 2 months, Ellen continues. It's decent enough. Pastor's wife can be a trial with her improving talk, but the roof doesn't leak and they're prompt with the coal. You nod, grateful for the honest assessment. Seems fair enough so far. Oh, it is, Ellen confirms. Just mind you attend Sunday service and look suitably grateful when the committee ladies visit. Small price, really. The advice is practical, the kind of survival knowledge shared between women who understand the unwritten rules of navigating charity, appear deserving, show improvement, express gratitude, maintain respectability, or at least its appearance. The walk to the factory takes you through unfamiliar streets, though still within the East End. Each neighbourhood has its own character, its own specific flavours of poverty. Some areas specialise in particular trades, Jewish tailors clustered here, Irish dockworkers there, English costermongers in another zone. Languages change, foods change, but the underlying struggle remains constant. At the factory gates, Mary greets you with visible relief. Thought you might not come, she admits. Heard you'd moved near the church. Still need work, don't I? You reply. New rooms don't pay for themselves. She nods, understanding the constants of East End economics. Charity might provide housing, but daily bread still requires daily labour. The machines don't care where you sleep at night. Inside, the familiar roar and heat and dust envelop you. Your hands find their tasks automatically, muscle memory taking over while your mind adjusts to the changes in your life. The cotton dust seems especially thick today, your chest tight within minutes of starting work. Use your cloth, Mary mouths silently. nodding at the scrap tucked in your collar. You wait until the floor manager turns away, then quickly pull the cloth over your nose and mouth, taking a few cleaner breaths before having to remove it. This dangerous dance continues throughout the day, protection snatched in brief moments, the constant fear of being seen and punished. By midday, a new worry emerges. The floor manager is moving between workers, speaking quietly to each before moving on. When he reaches your station, his message is blunt. Factories closing end of week, choleras too widespread, orders too. Your stomach drops. For how long? He shrugs. Week, maybe 2, maybe more. Depends how bad it gets. No work means no pay. No pay means no food, no rent. Even at the reduced church rate, the careful calculations of survival shatter in an instant. Everyone, you ask, hoping for some exception, some possibility. Everyone, he confirms. Be grateful for the notice. Matchworks down the road shut yesterday without warning. Small mercy indeed. 3 more days of pay instead of none. Time to warn your family, to try planning for the impossible. When you tell Mary, her face crumples briefly before she regains control. Feared as much, she says. Too many empty stations already. She's right. Looking around, you notice what panic had hidden. Nearly a quarter of the usual workers are absent today. Some sick, some caring for the sick, some already dead. The epidemic's invisible fingers reach everywhere. What will you do? You ask her. Try the laundries, she says after a moment. Always need washerwomen. Hard work, but better than nothing. You? You consider the options, none appealing. Same, maybe, or the Matchworks if they reopen first. The Matchworks, notorious for their dangerous conditions, the phosphorus that causes phossy jaw in workers, the last resort of the desperate, but they often hire women preferentially. Smaller fingers for delicate work, and they might recover from the epidemic closure faster than textile factories. The rest of the day passes in anxious planning. Each worker faces the same crisis, each devising desperate strategies for survival without wages. Some will try other factories not yet closed. Some will turn to street selling, matches, flowers, bootlaces, anything with a tiny margin of profit. Some will resort to the workhouse, swallowing pride to avoid starvation. A few women will consider the oldest profession, risking health and arrest for a few coins. There's hop picking, suggests an older woman nearby. In Kent, not for months yet, but they take anyone with willing hands when the time comes. Seasonal agricultural work, the traditional escape valve for urban poverty. Each summer, thousands of EastEnders migrate temporarily to the countryside, picking hops or harvesting fruits and vegetables. The pay is minimal, the conditions often harsh, but it provides crucial supplementary income for many families. Too far off, someone else counters. Needs something now. The conversation continues in snatches between machine noise, the collective wisdom of women who've weathered similar crises before. No solution is perfect, but each suggestion might help someone survive another week. At day's end, you walk home slowly, dreading sharing the news with your family. The new rooms just secured, already at risk. Your father's dock work might continue. Goods must flow regardless of epidemic, but one income isn't enough, especially with extra mouths to feed as your younger siblings lose their jobs too. Home, still strange to call the church rooms that, is quiet when you arrive. Your mother sits mending clothes by the better light of the larger windows, while your younger siblings practice letters on borrowed slates. The scene of relative domestic peace makes your news even harder to deliver. Factories closing, you announce without preamble. End of week. Cholera. Your mother's hands still momentarily, then resume their rhythmic stitching. For how long? Week or 2, maybe more. She nods, absorbing this new challenge without visible panic. "We'll manage." Those words again, the East End mantra. "We'll manage. Somehow." "Pastor Walsh mentioned they need help with the soup kitchen," she says after a moment. "Not much pay, but something, and Mrs. Walsh needs laundry done." The implications are clear. Charity received now means charity given in return, in the form of below-market labour. The system perpetuates itself, keeping the poor dependent while allowing the givers to feel virtuous. "I'll speak to them tomorrow," you agree. Any work is better than none. Your father takes the news with similar stoicism when he returns. "Docks are still running," he confirms. "Short-handed even. Men afraid to come in." That's something, at least. He nods, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. The punishing schedule of recent weeks shows in his gaunt face, the slight tremor in his hands. No body can sustain such effort indefinitely. "Miller started at the soup kitchen today," he adds. "Says they'll take you on if needed." The network of information and assistance continues to operate, each person helping others find whatever work remains available, sharing opportunities rather than hoarding them. This cooperative approach to survival, so at odds with the Victorian ideal of individualism, is what keeps the East End from complete collapse. That night, as the family prepares for sleep, a commotion outside draws you to the window. Torches move in the darkness, illuminating a cart and several figures in the street below. "What is it?" your mother asks, joining you. "Don't know." Your father peers over your shoulders. "Lime cart," he says grimly. "They're disinfecting the sewers." The parish board's response to cholera, treating the symptoms rather than the cause. Dumping lime into sewers might reduce the stench, might even kill some of the miasma believed to cause disease, but it doesn't address the fundamental problems of inadequate sanitation and contaminated water. You watch silently as workers shovel white powder into the sewer grates. Their faces are wrapped in cloths, their movements hasty. No one wants this dangerous job, but it pays, and work is work. "Will it help?" asks your youngest brother, squeezing between you to see. "Maybe," your father answers, his tone making clear his doubts. "Best keep to the clean water regardless." The lime cart continues its rounds, eventually disappearing around a corner. The family returns to bed, this new worry added to the accumulating weight of uncertainty. Morning brings unexpected news from your brother, the crossing sweeper. "Matchworks is hiring," he announces breathlessly, having run all the way home. "Replacing workers lost to the fever, taking anyone 16 or older starting tomorrow." The matchworks, dreaded but desperately needed. The phosphorus used in making lucifer matches is highly toxic, causing painful deterioration of the jawbone in workers exposed long term. But it pays, and payment means survival. "I'll go first thing," you decide. Mary mentioned it too. Your mother's face shows concern, but no protest. The dangers are real, but so is starvation. East End pragmatism trumps fear every time. "Be careful," is all she says. "Cover your face when you can." The lessons of the textile factory will serve you well. The hidden cloth, the stolen moments of protection, the constant vigilance. Different poison, same precautions. That afternoon, you visit Pastor Walsh to inquire about the soup kitchen work. The church's small office smells of paper and polish, a startling contrast to the general reek of East End streets. "Ah, Sarah," he greets you with genuine warmth. "Your father mentioned the factory closure. Most unfortunate." "Yes, sir. He said there might be work here." Walsh nods, leaning back in his chair. "Indeed. We're expanding the soup kitchen operations during the epidemic. Many families in dire need. We can offer 3 shillings weekly for 6 days' work. Morning hours, so you could potentially find afternoon employment elsewhere. The pay is poor. Less than half what the factory offered. But it's something. And as Walsh points out, the hours leave room for supplementary work. Thank you, sir. I'd be grateful. Excellent. He makes a note in a ledger. Start tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Mrs. Walsh will show you the duties. As you turn to leave, he adds, Sarah, I've noticed your younger siblings have some education. The Sunday school needs assistant teachers, paid positions, small but regular. Perhaps your sister might be interested. Another opportunity. Unexpected but welcome. Your 14-year-old sister, already literate and good with children, would make an excellent teacher's assistant. More importantly, it would keep her from more dangerous work like the matchworks. I'll ask her, sir. Thank you. Walking home, you calculate the new family budget, your father's dock work, your soup kitchen morning shift, potential matchworks afternoons, your sister teaching. It might be enough. Not comfortable, but enough to survive until the factory reopens. This constant recalculation, this perpetual adaptation to changing circumstances is the essence of East End survival. No situation remains static, no solution permanent. There is only the endless process of adjusting, compromising, finding new paths through the maze of poverty. Home again, you share the day's developments with your mother. She listens carefully, her own mental arithmetic visible in her expression. It could work, she concludes, until the factory starts again. The unspoken question hangs between you. What if it doesn't? What if the epidemic worsens, the closures extend indefinitely? There is no answer, only the next day's effort, the next week's struggle. Outside, church bells ring for evening service, a sound that will punctuate your lives now, marking hours, calling to worship, reminding of your place in the new hierarchy. Below your rooms, the mission hall fills with hymn singing, the sound rising through the floorboards. Your family listens silently to the familiar tunes, the words about comfort and salvation striking different ears differently. For some, genuine solace, for others, just another background noise in the complex symphony of East End survival. The matchworks looms grey and forbidding in the early morning light. You stand among a crowd of desperate people, mostly women and girls, but some men too, all hoping for work in one of London's most notorious establishments. They say it eats your jaw right off, mutters a woman beside you. My cousin worked here 3 years. Face just collapsed, it did. You've heard the stories about phossy jaw, the horrible necrosis that dissolves bone from the inside. Matchworkers develop aching teeth, their gums turn abscess, their jawbones rot away. Some lose half their face before the end. Got children to feed, the woman continues, as if defending herself. What choice is there? None. That's the answer every person in this crowd knows. When it's matchworks or starvation, you take the poison and hope for the best. The factory gates open and a foreman appears with a ledger. The crowd surges forward, fear momentarily overcome by the greater fear of returning home empty-handed. 20 positions, the foreman shouts above the noise. Women and girls first must have nimble fingers. You push your way toward him, conscience briefly troubled by taking work that others might need more, then hardened by the reality that someone will fill these slots regardless. Better you, supporting your family, than another. Age, the foreman demands when you reach him. 17, you lie, adding a year. Older workers are preferred. They last longer before the phosphorus takes its toll. He looks you over quickly, assessing strength and dexterity. Ever done matchwork? No, but I've worked cotton. Fast hands. He nods, making a notation in his ledger. 6 days, 7 to 7. 4 shillings weekly. Start today. 4 shillings for 72 hours. A pitiful wage, but more than the soup kitchen alone provides. Combined, they might keep the family afloat until the textile factory reopens. Inside, the Matchworks is a vision from nightmare. The main floor is packed with long tables where workers, mostly young women, sit dipping matchsticks into phosphorus paste. The air itself seems to glow with an eerie luminescence, particles of phosphorus floating visible in the dim light. And the smell, nothing in your experience compares. Chemical, acrid, so powerful it makes your eyes water and your throat close. Like the factory, but infinitely worse. You get used to it, says a hollow-eyed girl, noticing your expression. Sort of. Your food will taste like it for a while, though. A stern-faced woman supervisor assigns you to a dipping table, demonstrating the process with mechanical efficiency. Each frame holds 2,000 splints, she explains. Dip them evenly, not too deep. Set them to dry, then take the next frame. Count is checked at day's end. Short counts come from your pay. The work is simple but demanding. Each wooden frame contains match splints arranged in perfect rows. You dip them into the phosphorus mixture, careful to coat evenly but not waste the precious chemical. Then rack after rack, hour after hour, surrounded by the poison that will eventually kill you if you stay too long. By midday, your head pounds from the fumes. Other workers show the signs of long-term exposure, the distinctive phossy jaw smell on their breath, a precursor to the disease itself, and the eerie effect of phosphorus particles making their faces glow slightly in dark corners. "Don't eat with your hands," advises the same hollow-eyed girl during the brief lunch break. "That's how it gets you fastest. Use the cloth." She demonstrates, unwrapping bread with a scrap of cloth to avoid direct contact between phosphorus-covered fingers and food. You copy her technique gratefully, another small survival trick to add to your growing collection. "How long have you worked here?" you ask her. 2 years, she replies. "Started when I was 12, already getting the toothaches. Won't last another year, most like." She says this with chilling matter-of-factness, as if discussing the weather rather than her own approaching disfigurement and probable death. "There's safer ways," you suggest hesitantly. "The textile mills, when they reopen. My hands shake too much for fine work now," she interrupts, holding them out to demonstrate the slight but definite tremor, another effect of phosphorus poisoning. Once you've worked matches, other factories won't have you anyway. They know what's coming. The afternoon drags endlessly, your world narrowing to the frames of match splints and the burning in your lungs. By day's end, your hands are stained yellow from the chemicals, your head throbs mercilessly, and even your bones seem to ache from exposure. "Remember to wash," the hollow-eyed girl reminds you as you leave. "Cold water, lots of it, helps a little." Outside, blessed fresh air fills your lungs. You gulp it gratefully, trying to purge the chemical stench from your system. Even the normal East End miasma of sewage, smoke, and unwashed humanity seems pleasant by comparison. Home is still strange. The church room's not yet familiar enough to provide the automatic comfort of the old place. Your mother looks up from cooking when you enter, her expression changing to alarm at your appearance. "That bad?" she asks simply. You nod, heading straight for the water basin to scrub your yellowed hands. Worse than they say. She watches you wash, concern evident but unspoken. You both know there are no better options, not with the textile factory closed indefinitely. "The soup kitchen went well," she offers, changing the subject. "Your sister got the teaching position too. Starts Sunday." Small victories, the gradual assembly of enough income to survive. Pastor Walsh's connections proving valuable, whatever the cost in terms of independence and dignity. How's father, you ask? The dock work has been steady but punishing, especially with the reduced workforce due to cholera. Sleeping, double shift again. She hesitates. Sarah, he's wearing down. Can't keep this pace much longer. You look at your mother properly for the first time since entering. The lines in her face have deepened, the grey in her hair more prominent than even a month ago. The crisis is aging all of you, burning through whatever reserves of strength remained after years of ordinary poverty. I'll keep the matchworks, you decide. At least until something better comes. She nods, accepting the necessity. Just be careful. Cover your face when you can. The now familiar advice, the same for cotton dust, for phosphorus fumes, for any of the countless industrial poisons that working-class bodies absorb daily, small protections against overwhelming harm. Your father wakes at dusk, moving stiffly, his face drawn with the particular exhaustion that comes from physical labour beyond endurance. He eats mechanically, asking about your day at the matchworks, offering no comment on the obvious dangers. They're understood, as are the reasons for accepting them. Docks are closing sections now, he reports between bites. 2 wharves shut completely. Too many sick. Another potential crisis looming. If the docks close entirely, the family's primary income vanishes. The precariousness of your situation sharpens again. The brief relief of finding replacement work already fading. Walsh says the church has funds for affected families, your mother says carefully. If it comes to that. Your father's expression darkens slightly. The proud dock worker in him resists the idea of outright charity, though he's pragmatic enough to accept the reduced rent of the church rooms. Every working person has their line, the point where necessity battles pride. Let's hope it doesn't, he replies, focusing on his food. Evening brings a visit from Mrs. Walsh, ostensibly to check how you're settling into the new rooms, but clearly also to assess how the family is managing during the epidemic and factory closures. We're so blessed to have healthy workers for the soup kitchen, she tells your mother. The need grows daily, I'm afraid. So many families with no income at all now. Your mother nods, her expression carefully neutral. The implicit comparison is clear. Your family is fortunate, should be grateful, despite your own dire circumstances. Sarah's position at the matchworks is temporary, of course, Mrs. Walsh continues, glancing at your still yellowed hands. Such unwholesome employment for a young woman. I'm sure once this dreadful epidemic passes, more suitable work will resume. The condescension is well meant but grating. Like many middle-class philanthropists, Mrs. Walsh cannot truly comprehend that suitable work is a luxury the poor cannot afford. Survival trumps suitability every time. We're grateful for the soup kitchen position, your mother replies, diplomatically. Years of navigating charity have taught her how to satisfy such visitors without ceding too much dignity. After Mrs. Walsh leaves, promising to bring pamphlets about household economy, your mother allows herself a small sigh of exasperation. She means well, she says, though whether to convince you or herself isn't clear. I know. The same can be said for most of the philanthropists who venture into the East End. They mean well within the narrow constraints of Victorian charity. They rarely question the broader system that creates such poverty in the first place. Night falls, bringing the usual challenge of fitting too many bodies into too little space, even with the improvement of 2 rooms instead of 1. Sleep comes quickly despite the discomfort, your body exhausted from the matchworks, your mind too tired to sustain worry. Morning arrives with the church bells, a new soundtrack to your daily life. You dress quietly, preparing for the soup kitchen shift before heading to the matchworks. The pattern of your days has changed completely in just a few weeks. New home, new work, new challenges. The church kitchen is already busy when you arrive, other women preparing enormous pots of soup from donated vegetables and cheap cuts of meat. Mrs. Walsh oversees the operation with genuine competence, whatever her social blind spots. Sarah, good, she greets you. You'll be serving today. The need has grown so much we're opening an hour earlier. The serving line forms before preparations are even complete, a queue of hollow-eyed East Enders stretching down the street. Most are women with children, men being too proud to accept such charity until absolute desperation sets in. Some you recognise from your old neighbourhood, others from the factory, now closed. 1 bowl per person, Mrs. Walsh instructs firmly. We must make it stretch. You take your position behind the serving table, ladling thin soup into whatever containers people bring. Bowls, pots, even old tin cans. The gratitude in their eyes is painful to witness, knowing you're barely better off yourself, that only luck and Pastor Walsh's favour separate you from their side of the table. Mary appears in line mid-morning, her face flushing with embarrassment when she sees you serving. Didn't know you worked here, she mumbles, holding out a chipped bowl. May started yesterday, you explain, filling her bowl generously. Mornings here, afternoons at the matchworks. Her eyes widen. You got in at Bryant's, heard they had hundreds at the gate. Got lucky. You hesitate, then add quietly, they're still taking people, I think, if you need it. She nods, understanding the unspoken warning about phosphorus poisoning along with the information. Might try tomorrow. Laundry work's scarce with everyone doing their own now. This is how survival information passes through the East End. In brief exchanges, valuable intelligence shared freely among those who understand its worth. No one hoards knowledge that might help another navigate the treacherous waters of poverty. The soup kitchen shift ends at noon, leaving just enough time to reach the matchworks for your afternoon labour. The contrast between the two environments couldn't be starker, from the orderly charity of the church to the toxic hellscape of Bryant and May's factory. Your second day at the matches is marginally easier, your body beginning the terrible process of adaptation to the phosphorus fumes. The headache is still there, the burning in your lungs, but slightly less overwhelming. This is how it begins, the slow poisoning that workers endure until their bodies eventually revolt. Got yourself 2 jobs then? Asks the hollow-eyed girl. Annie, you've learned her name is. For now, you confirm, carefully dipping frames. Need to make up for the factory closing. She nods, understanding. Smart. I should have done the same. Saved something before. She gestures vaguely at herself, at the tremors in her hands, the early signs of deterioration. Isn't there anything to be done, you ask? For the jaw disease, any treatment? Removal, she says flatly. They cut your jaw out when it gets bad enough. If you can afford a surgeon, most can't. The matter-of-fact description chills you more than any dramatic language could. This is the East End way, facing horror directly, without embellishment. Cancer, consumption, cholera, phossy jaw, all discussed with the same pragmatic acceptance. You're new, Annie observes after a while. So, I'll tell you something. Don't stay more than 6 months if you can help it. The damage builds slow at first, then all at once. Get out before the toothaches start. 6 months, a deadline of sorts, though one you hope not to reach with the textile factory hopefully reopening sooner. Still, the warning lodges in your mind, a ticking clock added to the many others in your life. The workday finally ends, releasing you into the evening air. The walk home takes you past streets now marked with the red quarantine flags of cholera. More each day, the epidemic's grip tightening on the East End. People hurry past these marked buildings, eyes averted as if death might reach out from the windows. At one such house, a woman stands weeping on the steps, a stunned expression on her face. Neighbours maintain a careful distance, sympathy warring with self-preservation. "Lost her whole family," murmurs a passing man. "Husband yesterday, 3 children this morning, just like that. Just like that." The speed of cholera's devastation, not the slow wasting of tuberculosis that gives time for adjustment, for goodbyes, but a violent purging that can take a healthy person from life to death in hours. Home brings momentary relief from these grim realities. Your younger siblings chatter about their day, the small dramas of school and street that continue despite epidemic and poverty. Their resilience is both heartbreaking and hopeful, their ability to find joy in the narrowest circumstances, a lesson in survival. Your father returns from the docks earlier than expected, his expression unreadable. "Closed another section," he reports, "sending men home on rotation now, half shifts only." The dreaded news. Reduced hours meaning reduced pay. The delicate financial balance you've all constructed threatens to collapse again. "How much?" your mother asks practically. "Third less, give or take." He sits heavily at the table. Could be worse. Could be no work at all. You mentally recalculate the family budget, his reduced dock pay, your soup kitchen and matchworks wages, your sister's small income from the Sunday school. It might still be enough for rent and minimal food, no margin for illness or other crises, but basic survival remains possible. "We'll manage," your mother says, the familiar refrain taking on new weight with each repetition. Supper is simple but adequate. Potatoes and cabbage with a small piece of salt pork for flavour. The church position comes with occasional food donations, improving your diet slightly compared to before, small compensations for the new constraints. After eating, your father examines your hands, now permanently yellowed from the phosphorus despite vigorous washing. "Heard Bryant's was bad," he says quietly. "Didn't realise how bad." "It's just temporary," you assure him, though both of you know temporary solutions have a way of becoming permanent in the East End. Until the factory reopens. He nods, unconvinced but unwilling to voice concerns you're already well aware of. The danger is obvious, the necessity equally so. The calculus of survival leaves little room for safer choices. Evening brings another church meeting below your rooms. A temperance society this time, their passionate denunciations of drink rising through the floorboards. The irony isn't lost on your family. Lectures on the evils of gin delivered to the few who don't drink, rather than the many who do. "Might as well preach to the choir," your mother observes dryly, "since they're the only ones listening." The small joke, rare in these strained times, prompts tired smiles around the room. Humour is another survival mechanism in the East End, finding absurdity in even the grimmest circumstances. As night settles, your body aches with the accumulated fatigue of 2 jobs, your lungs still burning from phosphorus exposure. Sleep beckons irresistibly, the one reliable escape available to the poor. Before succumbing, you think of Annie at the matchworks, her matter-of-fact acceptance of her fate, of Mary in the soup line, her embarrassment at needing charity, of the woman who lost her entire family to cholera in a single day, and somehow, despite everything, your family remains intact, adapting to each new challenge, finding paths through seemingly impossible terrain, not thriving. Mere survival is far from that, but persisting against overwhelming odds. Tomorrow brings more of the same. Soup kitchen, matchworks, the constant vigilance against disease and accident and financial collapse. The day after, the same again. Each 24 hours a separate battle in the endless war of East End existence. But tonight, in the relative warmth of the church rooms, with full enough bellies and a secure roof, there is this moment of provisional peace. The knowledge that for now at least the family continues, that tomorrow's challenges will be met with the same stubborn determination that has carried you through thus far. In the East End of Victorian London, this is what passes for hope. Not grand dreams of escape or transformation, but the modest ambition of continued existence, of waking to fight another day in a world designed to grind such people to dust. Sleep comes quickly, your exhausted body surrendering to it completely. Outside, London continues its divided existence, the glittering West End of wealth and privilege, the desperate East of struggle and solidarity. Two worlds sharing a city but little else, connected by geography but separated by a gulf of experience wider than the Thames itself. And in that eastern world, millions like your family navigate their precarious paths, finding ways through seemingly impossible circumstances, creating communities of mutual support amid institutional neglect, surviving against all odds in the shadow of the greatest empire the world has ever known. April arrives with unexpected mercy, a break in the cholera's advance. The death tallies, which had climbed relentlessly through March, suddenly plateau and then begin a hesitant decline. The red quarantine flags, once spreading like a rash across East End streets, appear on fewer new buildings. 7 days without a new case on Flower Street, reports your brother, the crossing sweeper. Doctor says the lime treatment might be working. The lime treatment, or something else entirely. No one truly understands why cholera retreats as suddenly as it attacks. Some credit divine intervention, others the changing weather, still others the massive quantities of disinfectant dumped into sewers and cesspits over recent weeks. Whatever the cause, the slow recession of immediate death brings cautious relief to the neighbourhood. People stand a little straighter, speak a little louder, as if emerging from a long shadow. Textile mills reopening next week, Mary tells you during a brief encounter at the soup kitchen. She's found work there too, having avoided the matchworks despite her desperate circumstances. Just got word, not full production yet, but starting up again. The news sends a surge of hope through your tired body. 2 weeks at the matchworks has already left its mark. Constant headaches, yellowed skin, the faint phosphorus glow visible on your hands in darkened rooms. 6 months until permanent damage, Annie had warned. You've served only a fraction of that sentence, but every day feels like tempting fate. You'll go back? Mary asks, though the answer is obvious. Soon as they'll have me. The textile dust suddenly seems benign compared to phosphorus poisoning. At home, the news about the factory prompts the first genuine smiles in weeks. Your family has survived, battered but intact, unlike so many others. The careful patchwork of temporary jobs and reduced expenses has held together just long enough. Think we should stay here, though, your father says, gesturing at the church rooms. Even with the factory wages back, the rent's better, and your mother's got steady work with Mrs. Walsh now. The suggestion reveals how much has changed in just a month. The church rooms, initially seen as a temporary measure, a slight step down in independence though up in comfort, have become a stable foundation. The connections to Pastor Walsh's network of charity and employment have proven valuable beyond expectation. The Sunday teaching helps too, adds your sister, who has discovered an aptitude for education that might, in time, lead to better opportunities. Pastor says I might train properly someday. Small seeds of improvement planted amid crisis. Not enough to escape the East End entirely. That dream remains distant for most, but perhaps enough to secure a slightly higher position within its complex hierarchy. The following days bring more signs of neighbourhood recovery. The soup kitchen lines grow marginally shorter as some factories resume operations. The quarantine flags come down from buildings where death has completed its harvest. People begin to speak of the epidemic in past tense, though warily, as if afraid to provoke its return. Your last day at the Matchworks brings mixed emotions, profound relief at escaping its toxic environment, but also concern for those left behind. Annie, your hollow-eyed guide, accepts your departure with characteristic fatalism. "Smart to get out," she says, her hands trembling slightly as she dips match frames. "This place is a coffin with the lid propped open. Will you try somewhere else?" you ask, though you know the answer. She shakes her head. Too far gone now, teeth starting to loosen. Once it gets in your bones, she shrugs, the gesture containing all the resignation of the East End's most vulnerable. You leave her a small gift, the protective cloth your mother made, now impregnated with a vinegar solution that supposedly helps filter phosphorus fumes. A tiny defense against overwhelming harm, but better than nothing. She accepts it with genuine gratitude, both of you knowing it's inadequate but appreciating the gesture nonetheless. Outside, you take a long, deep breath of relatively fresh air, savouring the knowledge that you won't return to the phosphorus hell tomorrow. Your lungs still burn, your head still aches, but time away from the source might allow recovery before permanent damage sets in. The textile factory welcomes back workers gradually, operating at reduced capacity as orders slowly resume. Your former position at the spinning frame isn't available, but there's work in the carding room. Dirtier, dustier, but still preferable to the Matchworks. The familiar roar of machinery, once oppressive, now seems almost comforting. The cotton dust still chokes, but you use your mother's cloth more boldly now. The floor manager's too busy with restart operations to notice or care. Small rebellions that might preserve your lungs a little longer. Mary works nearby, both of you silently grateful for the return to relative normalcy. The pay isn't fully restored, 3/4 of the previous wage until full production resumes, but combined with your father's dock work, now also recovering, it's enough to maintain the careful balance of survival. April slides into May, bringing genuine spring to even the East End's grimy streets. Sparse trees put forth tentative leaves, quickly dulled by soot but green nonetheless. The air warms, windows open, life emerges from winter's grip and epidemic's shadow. Your family adapts to its new circumstances with the resilience that defines East End existence. The church rooms become truly home, their institutional character softened by familiar possessions and daily use. The relationship with Pastor Walsh and his wife evolves from charity to something more complex. Not quite equality, but a mutual recognition that transcends simple benefactor and recipient. "They're having a May fair on the church grounds," Mrs. Walsh informs your mother one afternoon. "We'd be so pleased if your family would help with the preparations. Sarah has such a good hand with the little ones from the soup kitchen." The invitation represents a subtle shift in status, from objects of charity to participants in community. Your mother accepts with appropriate gratitude, understanding the social currents at play. The East End may be a different world from wealthy London, but it has its own intricate hierarchies, its own paths for careful advancement. The Mayfair itself proves unexpectedly enjoyable, a rare day of genuine leisure amid the constant work of survival. The church grounds, normally austere, transform with simple decorations and stalls selling penny treats. Children from the Sunday school perform songs, their thin voices surprisingly beautiful in unison. For a few hours, the grinding realities of East End life recede slightly, allowing space for communal joy. "Never seen you smile so much," Mary comments, having come at your invitation. "Church life suits you, seems like." "Just nice to have a day off," you reply, though it's more complicated than that. The church connection has brought tangible benefits: better housing, supplementary income, a slightly higher social position within the neighbourhood. The trade-offs: conforming to expectations, attending services, accepting moral guidance, seem increasingly reasonable given the advantages. Your father watches the festivities with a more reserved expression. The proud dock worker still chafes slightly under charitable supervision, though he acknowledges its practical benefits. His health has improved with the reduced workload, the double shifts of March no longer necessary, with multiple family members contributing income. "Might be work at the new brewery," he mentions casually as you walk home. "Proper work with regular hours, not like the docks." The comment reveals his own calculations about the future. Dock work has been his identity for decades, but it's brutally hard on aging bodies. The epidemic's disruption has perhaps opened space to consider alternatives, to prioritise sustainability over pride. "You'd be good at it," you encourage, understanding the enormity of such a potential change. "Steady wage too." He nods, neither committing nor dismissing. Like every East End family, yours constantly evaluates options, recalculates paths, seeks the least dangerous route through precarious circumstances. At home, these discussions continue in the practical shorthand of people who understand exactly what's at stake. Every potential change, from jobs to housing to education, gets weighed against immediate needs and longer-term security. The delicate balance achieved during the epidemic provides a foundation, but improvement requires continued vigilance and strategic decisions. Your own health becomes part of these calculations. The weeks at the Matchworks have left their mark. Occasional tremors in your hands, headaches that come without provocation, a persistent metallic taste. Recovery seems probable with no further exposure, but the experience has added urgency to finding safer employment options. The church school needs assistant teachers, your sister suggests. Like me, but for the day classes, Pastor Walsh mentioned they're looking. Teaching, a step up from factory work in both status and safety, though at potentially lower initial pay. The prospect is tempting, especially with the memory of phosphorus fumes still burning in your lungs. I'll speak to him, you decide. Education has never seemed a realistic path before, but the church connection opens doors previously invisible. Pastor Walsh receives the inquiry with enthusiasm. "Sarah, yes indeed. Your sister speaks highly of your capabilities. We're expanding the day school. So many children needing proper guidance. The pay is modest to start, but there are opportunities for advancement with training." The position would mean leaving the factory again, trading higher immediate wages for better conditions and potential future improvement. Another calculation in the complex arithmetic of East End survival: immediate needs versus longer security. "I'd like to try," you tell him, "if the opportunity's available." He smiles with genuine pleasure. "Wonderful. Mrs. Cooper can begin your training next week, a few hours after your factory shift initially, then transitioning to full days as you're ready." The arrangement seems ideal, allowing a gradual shift without immediately sacrificing needed income. Another small step toward a marginally better position within the East End's constraints. May blossoms into June, bringing both benefits and challenges. The warmer weather reduces the constant cold that plagues poorly heated homes, but also accelerates the decay of refuse in streets and yards. The smell of the East End in summer is legendary. A potent brew of rotting food, human and animal waste, industrial chemicals, and unwashed bodies. Like God's own chamber pot, your father observes dryly as particularly ripe odours waft through open windows one evening. The heat transforms your crowded rooms from merely uncomfortable to nearly unbearable at night. Bodies packed together on shared beds generate sweltering temperatures that make sleep elusive. Many take to the streets after dark, seeking relief in marginally cooler air, despite the dangers of East End nights. Could be worse, your mother reminds everyone during a particularly stifling evening. Remember Fuller Court? The family's previous home before your current rooms, even more crowded, with worse ventilation and a cesspit that regularly overflowed in summer heat. The memory provides perspective, a reminder that even within poverty, degrees of suffering exist. Your training at the church school progresses well, revealing an aptitude for working with children that surprises you. The rowdy East End students, many from the poorest families, respond to your practical approach and genuine understanding of their circumstances. "You don't talk down to them," observes Mrs. Cooper, the head teacher. "So many charitable instructors treat them like little savages to be civilized. You meet them where they are." Coming from the same streets gives you an advantage that middle-class teachers lack. You understand the children's home lives, their limited options, their practical needs. Education, in your approach, becomes less about moral improvement and more about providing tools for slightly better survival. By July, you've transitioned to half-days at the school, maintaining afternoon shifts at the factory to keep income steady. The arrangement exhausts but satisfies, a foot in two worlds, maintaining necessary wages while building towards something marginally better. Your health gradually improves with distance from the matchworks. The tremors subside, the headaches become less frequent, the yellow staining on your skin fades, though not completely, a permanent reminder of how close you came to irreversible harm. Mary visits one Sunday bringing news of Annie from the matchworks. "In hospital now," she reports soberly. "The jaw disease took hold faster than usual. They're saying the removal surgery's her only chance." The information hits with visceral force. There but for fortune go you. Another few months in that toxic environment and similar fate might have awaited. The narrow margins between survival and disaster in East End life have never seemed clearer. Will she recover, you ask, though recovery is relative in such cases. Surviving surgery still means disfigurement, disability, likely unemployment. Mary shrugs. Depends if the infection's spread too far already, and if she can afford proper care afterward. The unspoken reality, proper aftercare, is unlikely for a match worker with no savings and no family support. The workhouse hospital provides basic treatment, but little beyond. Another East End life likely to be cut short by industrial poisoning, one of thousands each year. "I've been thinking," Mary says after a pause, "might try for the teaching too, if you think Pastor Walsh would consider another recommendation. The request represents enormous trust. Access to Walsh's charitable network is valuable currency in East End economics. You consider carefully before responding. I'll speak to him, you promise. You're good with the little ones at the soup kitchen. He's noticed that." Mary's face brightens slightly. "Anything to get clear of the factory eventually. My chest can't take much more. This shared aspiration, not wealth or luxury, but simply work that doesn't actively destroy health, illustrates the modest dreams of most East Enders. Not escape to West End mansions, but perhaps a small room without deadly employment, a slight easing of the constant physical toll." Summer advances, bringing the traditional East End exodus as thousands depart temporarily for agricultural work in surrounding counties. Hop picking in Kent, fruit harvesting in Essex, grain harvest in Hertfordshire. Seasonal labour that provides crucial supplementary income for many families. "We could try it," suggests your brother, now 15 and strong enough for field work. "Fletchers from next door say they make a month's wages in 2 weeks picking hops." Your father considers the proposal with typical practical assessment. Who'd go? Need some to stay for the regular work. The family debates options. Which members could be spared from current employment, which would be most productive in the fields, which most needed at home. The complex equations of maximizing income while maintaining stability. In the end, your father and older brother commit to 2 weeks of hop picking in August, when the dock work traditionally slows and the harvest needs extra hands. You, your mother, and younger siblings will maintain the household and regular employment, keeping the delicate financial balance intact. "Probably be good for him," your mother comments after they've gone. "Fresh air, different work. He's been looking worn thin." The observation is accurate. Your father has aged visibly during the crisis months, the punishing dock labour taking its toll on a body already worn by decades of physical strain. The rural work, though still demanding, might provide some restoration. In their absence, the household falls into a different rhythm. With fewer bodies, the rooms seem larger, the air clearer. Sleep comes easier without the press of too many people in too little space. Small luxuries of movement and breath that highlight how crowded normal conditions remain. Your teaching work expands to fill the additional time, Mrs. Cooper, increasingly confident in your abilities. The East End children respond well to your instruction, particularly the practical lessons focused on skills that might actually improve their future prospects. They need sums they can use at market, you explain when questioned about your emphasis on everyday mathematics rather than abstract concepts. Reading that helps with work notices, writing clear enough for applications. This pragmatic approach earns approval from Pastor Walsh, who increasingly sees your family as a success story for his mission, not transformed into middle-class propriety, but stabilized within working-class respectability, a narrative he can present to donors as evidence of charitable effectiveness. "We're considering expanding the school program," he informs you one afternoon. "Perhaps a proper training position for someone with your background, a bridge between our charitable work and the community. The possibility represents another small step upward, from assistant to trained teacher, from temporary to permanent employment. Not enough to leave the East End entirely, but perhaps enough to secure a slightly less precarious position within it." "I'd be honoured to be considered," you reply, the formal phrasing now coming more naturally after months in the church environment. He smiles approvingly. "Excellent. We'll discuss details when the programme funding is confirmed. Your mother mentioned your friend Mary might have similar interests." The casual demonstration of influence, your mother's access to Pastor Walsh, your recommendation potentially extending that access to Mary, highlights how much your family's position has shifted. Still firmly working class, still East Enders, but with connections and opportunities marginally better than before. Your father and brother return from hop-picking sun-browned and weary but satisfied. The work has been hard but productive, the earnings substantial enough to justify the effort. More importantly, the temporary escape from London's oppressive environment seems to have restored something in your father. A straightening of the shoulders, a lightness in movement that had been gradually disappearing. "Decent folk, the farmers," he reports. "Hard but fair, say they'd welcome us back next season." The rural experience has opened another potential path: seasonal migration that many East End families practice, maintaining London work for most of the year, but supplementing with agricultural labour during critical harvest periods. Another strategy in the complex portfolio of survival. As summer fades toward autumn, your family's situation stabilizes into a new pattern. The church rooms provide better shelter than previous accommodations. Multiple income sources, dock work, factory shifts, teaching positions, seasonal labor create a more resilient financial foundation. Connections to Pastor Walsh's charitable network offer modest opportunities for advancement. None of this represents escape from the East End's fundamental constraints. You remain working class, poor by any objective standard, vulnerable to economic disruptions and health crises. But within those constraints, you've achieved a slightly improved position, less precarious, marginally healthier, with small seeds of potential improvement planted. This, perhaps, is the most realistic definition of success for most East Enders. Not transformation or escape, but incremental improvement within existing constraints. A slightly better room, slightly safer work, slightly more stable income. Small victories that collectively make survival more sustainable. As you walk home from teaching one evening, you pass the matchworks where disaster nearly claimed you. The glow of phosphorus is visible even from outside, illuminating windows with eerie blue-green light. Workers emerge, faces haggard, hands trembling, carrying the poison home in their bodies, where it will continue its work through the night. Among them, you recognize a girl who started around the same time as you, already showing signs of the disease that will eventually disfigure and likely kill her. You want to warn her to share Annie's advice about the 6-month deadline, but she hurries past without meeting your eyes. The encounter reinforces your understanding of how narrowly you avoided that fate, how quickly disaster can overtake even careful planning in the East End, how survival depends not just on hard work and wise decisions, but also on fortune, timing, connections, factors beyond individual control. Home, the church rooms now truly feel like that, offers respite from these sobering reflections. Your family gathers for the evening meal, sharing news of the day, making plans for tomorrow. The conversation flows easier than during the crisis months, the constant edge of panic, somewhat dulled by relative stability. Pastor Walsh mentioned you for the training position, your mother tells you as dishes are cleared. Says it would start after Christmas. Another step forward, small but significant. Not enough to transform your circumstances entirely, but enough to continue the gradual improvement of recent months. In the East End, such incremental progress is victory enough. Outside, London continues its divided existence. The glittering West End of wealth and privilege, the struggling East of labour and poverty. Two worlds sharing geography but little else, interconnected by economics but separated by vast chasms of experience and opportunity. And in that eastern world, your family and millions like it continue navigating the treacherous waters of industrial poverty, finding paths through seemingly impossible terrain, building communities of mutual support amid institutional neglect, surviving, and occasionally even modestly thriving, in the shadow of the greatest empire the world has ever known. Winter descends on London with its particular cruelties. December brings bitter cold that seeps through walls and rattles windows, turning breath to fog even indoors. For the East End poor, winter has always been the deadliest season, a time when food grows scarcer, fuel more precious, and the margin between survival and disaster thins to nearly nothing. but this winter feels different for your family. The church rooms, while still modest, hold warmth better than any previous home. The small coal allotment that comes with the reduced rent keeps a decent fire going most days. The multiple income streams, your father's more regular brewery work, your teaching position, your sister's Sunday school role, your brother's crossing sweep supplemented by odd jobs, create a buffer against the season's harshest demands. "Never thought I'd see a Christmas with meat on the table," your mother remarks as she prepares the small goose Pastor Walsh gifted to key families in his congregation. The bird is hardly plump by wealthy standards, but for an East End family, it represents unprecedented luxury. "Been a strange year," your father agrees, watching the preparations from his chair by the fire. His new position at the brewery, secured through a connection of Walsh's, provides steadier hours and marginally better pay than the docks, though the work remains physically demanding. The greatest benefit is stability. No more waiting at gates hoping to be chosen for a day's labour. No more feast or famine cycles that defined dock work. Your own position has evolved as promised. The training program began after Christmas, transitioning you from factory assistant to proper teacher in training. The pay remains modest, but the conditions incomparably better. Clean air, reasonable hours, work that engages rather than depletes. Your lungs have mostly recovered from the matchworks poisoning, though occasional tremors in your hands remain as permanent reminders of how narrowly you escaped. "Mary's starting her training next month," you tell your mother as you help prepare vegetables. "Mrs. Cooper says she shows real promise with the youngest children. Your friend's path has roughly followed your own, from factory to part-time assistants to potential training." Another East End life slightly improved through the same network of connections and opportunities that benefited your family. Not transformation, but incremental progress within existing constraints. "And the matchworks girl?" your mother asks. "The one who helped you?" "Annie." The name comes with a pang of mingled guilt and gratitude. Still in hospital, the surgery removed most of her jaw, but the infection had spread. They don't think she'll last till spring. The stark reality of East End fate, how quickly circumstances diverge, how narrow the gap between modest improvement and complete disaster. Had you remained at the matchworks even a few weeks longer, your path might have mirrored Annie's instead of your current trajectory. Christmas itself passes quietly, but with unprecedented comfort for your family. The church service, obligatory given your connection to Pastor Walsh, feels less like requirement and more like genuine community as familiar faces from the soup kitchen, the school and neighbouring rooms gather together. The sermon, for once, speaks directly to East End experience rather than imposing middle-class morality from above. Christ was born not in a palace, but a stable, Walsh reminds his congregation, among the poor, the working people, those who understood hardship as daily reality rather than abstract concept. The message resonates differently here than it might in wealthy West End churches. For people who have known true poverty, the nativity story contains elements of genuine recognition, the desperate search for shelter, the makeshift accommodations, the vulnerability of new life in harsh conditions. After service, your family shares its modest feast in the relative warmth of your rooms. The goose, supplemented by potatoes and cabbage and a small pudding, represents abundance by East End standards. No one goes hungry, a triumph in itself during winter months when food prices traditionally rise and work often becomes scarcer. "Should visit the old neighbourhood tomorrow," your father suggests as the meal concludes. "See how things stand. Bring some leftovers to the Parkers if they're still there." The proposal is practically radical. Having extra food to share rather than needing charity themselves marks a significant shift in your family's circumstances. Still firmly within working class poverty by any objective standard, but marginally more secure than before. The following day brings clear, cold weather as you make the walk to your former home. The distance isn't great, barely half an hour on foot, but the psychological gap feels wider with each step. Streets grow narrower, buildings more dilapidated, faces more gaunt as you enter the neighbourhood you left just months ago. Your old building looks smaller somehow, its crumbling facade more apparent now that you've experienced slightly better accommodation. Children play in the muddy courtyard despite the cold, their thin clothes inadequate against the winter chill. You recognise some faces, though others have disappeared. The constant churn of East End residents as families move seeking work, cheaper lodging, or escape from debt. Mrs. Parker answers your knock, her face showing momentary confusion before recognition dawns. "Sarah Watkins," she says with genuine warmth. "Hardly expected to see you back here. Her husband's death from consumption had seemed inevitable when you left. His lungs destroyed by years in the tanneries, his body wasting away while medical bills consumed what little savings they had. How's Mr. Parker?" you ask hesitantly, expecting the worst. To your surprise, she smiles. Better, if you can believe it. The new doctor from the dispensary tried something different. Still weak, but eating again. Even talking about light work come spring. A rare East End miracle. Recovery from what had seemed certain death. Such reprieves are uncommon but precious, reminders that even in the harshest circumstances, hope occasionally justifies itself. You present the small package of leftover goose and potatoes, which she accepts with dignity rather than effusive gratitude. The exchange feels different from charity, one working family sharing with another during temporary hardship, an act of community rather than condescension. "Heard you're teaching now," she says as you prepare to leave. "Always had a quick mind, even as a girl. Good to see it recognised." The observation touches something deep, the sense that your current path, while still constrained by East End realities, allows use of abilities that factory work would have gradually destroyed. Not freedom exactly, but a marginally better fit between capacity and opportunity. Walking back toward the church rooms, you pass the textile factory where your East End working life began. The massive brick structure belches smoke as always, the machines inside devouring human energy to produce wealth that flows elsewhere. You feel strange looking at it now, not quite nostalgia, but recognition of how completely it once defined your existence, how narrowly you escaped being consumed by its hunger. "Oh, Sarah," a voice calls from the factory gates as workers emerge for their brief midday break. Mary waves, hurrying to meet you despite the cold. "Checking on old neighbours," you explain. "How's the work?" "Same as ever." She shrugs, her breath clouding in the winter air. "Looking forward to starting at the school next month. Thanks for putting in the word." "You'll be good at it," you assure her. The prediction feels genuine. Mary has always shown patience with children, a quality valuable in East End teaching where students come from challenging backgrounds and often attend sporadically between work responsibilities. "Miller's back at the docks," she tells you. "Limited work with his hand, but they found him something. Better than nothing." Another small victory in the ongoing battle for East End survival, accommodation rather than abandonment of an injured worker, not through institutional support, the system provides none, but through community connections and individual compassion from a sympathetic foreman. You part with promises to meet when her teaching training begins, the friendship maintained despite your diverging paths. This too is characteristic of East End life. Connections preserved across changing circumstances, networks of mutual support that transcend individual advancement. The contrast between your old neighbourhood and current situation clarifies on the walk home. The improvement is real but modest. Slightly better housing, slightly safer work, slightly more stable income. You remain firmly within working class constraints, vulnerable to illness or economic downturns or simple bad luck. But the precariousness has diminished somewhat, the daily calculations of survival grown marginally less desperate. At home, your mother has begun preparations for the small New Year's gathering Pastor Walsh encourages among his congregation. Nothing extravagant, tea and simple cakes, conversation and perhaps singing, but a social occasion nonetheless, something rarely accessible in your previous circumstances, where leisure itself was an unaffordable luxury. Mrs. Walsh wants to know if you'll help with the children's games, she tells you as you remove your coat. Says you have a good way with the little ones. The request represents another subtle shift in status, from recipient of charity to participant in its distribution, from object of improvement to agent of it, still within clear hierarchical bounds, but with marginally more agency than before. Evening brings your father home from the brewery, tired but satisfied in the way that honest labour without exploitation allows. The family gathers around the small table for supper, sharing news of the day, making plans for tomorrow. The conversation flows easily, without the edge of desperation that once accompanied every discussion of future prospects. Pastor Walsh mentioned possible rooms opening on the upper floor, your father says between bites. Slightly larger, same rent, might be worth considering with the little ones growing. The casual discussion of improved accommodation, not from necessity but preference, highlights how much has changed. Not transformation into middle-class comfort, certainly, but evolution from constant crisis to modest planning, from reactive survival to proactive management of limited resources. After supper, your youngest siblings practice reading by firelight, the education that once seemed luxury, now central to family strategy. Literacy, numeracy, and specific skills offer potential paths to slightly better positions within working-class constraints. Not escape from the East End entirely, but perhaps advancement within its complex hierarchies. As bedtime approaches, the now familiar routine unfolds, washing faces and hands with carefully rationed water, arranging sleeping spaces to maximize comfort with limited resources, banking the fire to preserve precious warmth through the night. The crowding remains, the physical conditions still humble by any objective standard, but the desperate edge has softened. You lie awake briefly after others have fallen asleep, listening to the night sounds of the East End through the window. Distant factory whistles marking shift changes, occasional shouts or laughter from the street, the rattle of late carts on cobblestones, the symphony of working London continuing its perpetual rhythm regardless of individual circumstances. Your thoughts drift to the year just ending, the cholera crisis that nearly destroyed so many, the dangerous work that almost claimed you, the unexpected opportunities that altered your family's trajectory. None of it planned or controlled, all of it navigated through combination of effort, connection, community support, and simple fortune. This, perhaps, is the true lesson of East End survival. Not that hard work guarantees improvement, as wealthier Victorians might preach, but that persistence creates possibility. That collective effort and mutual support sometimes allow individuals to weather crises that would destroy them in isolation. That small decisions, accumulated over time, occasionally open paths to marginally better circumstances. Morning arrives with weak winter sunlight filtering through frosted windows. The church bells mark the hour, a sound once foreign, now familiar. Another day begins in this complex world within a world, this shadow city that makes possible the glittering London celebrated in history books and newspaper accounts. Your family rises and prepares for their various responsibilities: teaching, brewery work, school, crossing, sweeping, each person's labour contributing to the collective survival, each day's effort adding to the foundation of modest security built over recent months. Outside, the East End continues its perpetual struggle, millions navigating similar paths through equally challenging terrain, finding ways to survive and occasionally even modestly thrive in circumstances designed to extract maximum labour for minimum return, creating communities, preserving dignity, maintaining humanity in conditions that constantly threaten to erode all three. As you walk to the school where your training continues, you pass others hurrying to factories, workshops, markets, and construction sites, faces marked by the same combination of determination and resignation that characterises East End existence, the pragmatic acceptance of constraints alongside stubborn insistence on carving space for life within them. These are your people, not by choice initially, but by birth and circumstance, yet increasingly by recognition and solidarity as well. Your slightly improved position doesn't separate you from them, but rather offers opportunity to extend the same networked support that benefited your family. This too is part of East End survival, the understanding that individual advancement means little without community connection, that real security comes not from escaping completely, which remains impossible for most, but from strengthening collective resilience within existing constraints. The school building appears ahead, a modest structure but clean and relatively warm. Children already gather in the yard despite the early hour, many having walked long distances from homes with no heat or food to this place of relative comfort and guaranteed sustenance. You recognise their experiences intimately, the calculating intelligence in young eyes, the carefully maintained clothes that can't quite hide poverty's physical markers, the complex mixture of wariness and hope with which they approach education, not as abstract concept, but as potential tool for marginally better futures. Inside, Mrs. Cooper greets you with genuine respect rather than charitable condescension. Your training progresses well, your background providing insights that middle-class teachers often lack. You understand these children, their home conditions, their practical needs, their limited options, in ways impossible for those who've never experienced similar circumstances. This understanding becomes your particular contribution, a bridge between institutional charity and community need, translating between worlds that rarely communicate effectively. Not transformation of the system, certainly, but perhaps marginal improvement in its implementation. Small victories in the ongoing struggle of East End existence. As you prepare learning materials for the day's lessons, you reflect on the distance travelled, from factory worker to teacher in training, from crisis-level poverty to modest stability, from isolation to community connection. The journey hasn't carried you out of the East End, or even out of working-class constraints, but it has created space for something beyond mere survival. In this space, small but precious, lies the possibility of helping others navigate similar paths, of extending connections that benefited your family to Mary, to the Parker family, to the children you now teach, of participating in the complex network of mutual support that defines East End resilience. Outside, London continues its divided existence. In wealthy districts, privileged lives unfold in ignorance or indifference to conditions just miles away. In Whitehall, policies affecting millions are crafted by those who've never experienced their consequences. In gleaming shops and offices, profits accumulate from labour performed in circumstances their beneficiaries would consider unendurable. But here in the East End, in this shadow city that makes possible London's greatness, ordinary people continue creating extraordinary communities of support, finding ways through seemingly impossible circumstances, preserving dignity and humanity in conditions designed to destroy both. Your family's journey from desperate crisis to modest stability, from isolation to connection, represents one small thread in this vast tapestry of working-class experience, neither uniquely successful nor tragically failed, simply illustrative of how survival occurs in the margins of Victorian prosperity. As the school day begins and children settle into their lessons, you feel a quiet contentment unfamiliar in previous work. Not happiness exactly. East End realities permit few such luxuries, but satisfaction in useful labour, in meaningful connection, in small but genuine contribution to collective well-being. This too is part of East End survival, finding purpose within constraint, creating meaning despite limitation, building community across difference, the resilience not just of bodies but of spirits, insisting on humanity's value even when systems deny it. And in this resilience, this stubborn persistence, lies the true history of London's East End, not just the poverty and hardship so often highlighted, but the extraordinary strength of ordinary people creating lives worth living in circumstances designed to prevent exactly that. As you guide a young girl through her letters, you recognise your younger self in her determined concentration. The East End continues, generation after generation, its people adapting to changing conditions while maintaining the core strategies of survival: mutual support, practical knowledge, stubborn persistence. In this continuity, this passing of wisdom from one generation to the next, the East End ensures its survival not just as place but as community. As you once learned from others, now others learn from you, the cycle of knowledge and resilience perpetuating itself through time. Outside, London continues its perpetual motion. Inside this small classroom, in this moment of quiet connection, you find your particular place within its complex machinery, not escaping the East End's constraints, but helping others navigate them more effectively. Not transforming the system entirely, but creating small spaces of dignity and meaning within it. This, perhaps, is the most realistic definition of East End success, not dramatic escape, but incremental improvement, not individual advancement alone, but community connection, not rejection of reality, but creation of possibility within it. As the winter sun traces its low arc across London's sky, as the East End continues its daily rhythms of work and rest, as your family prepares for another night in modest but secure shelter, you recognise the distance travelled and the journey continuing, the story of survival, written not in dramatic transformation, but in countless small choices, connections, and persistent efforts. This story, your families, your neighbourhoods, your communities, continues beyond this moment, beyond this winter, beyond even your individual experience. The East End persists through changing conditions, adapting strategies while maintaining core resilience, creating possibility within constraint. And in this persistence, this adaptation, this creation, lies its quiet victory, not over circumstances entirely, but within them, finding ways to survive, to connect, to occasionally even thrive in the shadow of empire's wealth, building communities of mutual support when institutions fail, preserving humanity when systems deny it, insisting on dignity when conditions threaten to erode it. As night falls across London, as you return to the warmth of family and the relative security of your rooms, as sleep approaches with its temporary reprieve from East End realities, this understanding brings a certain peace, not complacency or acceptance of injustice, but recognition of extraordinary resilience in ordinary lives. In this recognition, this appreciation, this honouring of East End strength, may you find your own rest, comfortable in your modern bed, grateful for comforts taken for granted, mindful of those who survived with so much less. Let their resilience inspire yours as you drift toward sleep, their stories becoming part of your dreams.